Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video.
I piloted the Defiant towards the facility we'd be attacking. I felt a bit of tension. While this place wasn't going to be an insane risk to attack, it was also important. According to what we knew, Hydra was using it as a necessary hub for refueling and resupplying. Davide's team had managed to sneak us a photo, which had been analyzed by bridge personnel and was used to find the location. From there, Jarvis and X started analyzing it. We knew as much about the base as one could without actually living there. "How's your movie watching going?" I asked the empty air. "I'm enjoying it, sir," X said over my comms. "I quite like the animatrix." "I wondered what you would think of it," I said with a smile. "Especially of the Matrix as a whole. I preferred the Ghost in the Shell manga and anime, but I still enjoyed them overall. Any idea what you want to watch next?" I asked. "Actually, I believe I'll take a break from movies for a week, sir. I'll be putting more time into literature and manga." Before I could respond, Bucky poked his head into the cockpit. He looked at me, then moved into the co-pilot's seat. I waited for him to speak. Bucky was doing well, all things considered. When he was around Steve, he joked around, made fun of his friend, laughed, but he was still a former assassin, working for redemption. So I waited as he thought of what he wanted to say. "You might end up killing again? Are you prepared for that?" I thought of what to say to that. I no longer had the same bravado I had the last time. I'd spent time thinking about what I'd done, and every mission after I'd done what I could to stop myself from killing anyone. But my role this time called for me to do serious damage. The Hulk and Dial going in and smashing anyone in our way, people would likely die. In the same that even though everyone enjoyed giant monster fights, there was still the fridge logic of the thousands of people dying in the midst of the kaiju fighting. "I'm prepared as I can be," I said at last. "I don't want to, and I'll try not to, but I think the graveyard got rid of any sympathy I have for Hydra. The graveyard, where they tortured, tested and experimented on failures of Hydra experiments going back decades, with the numbers going into the thousands. Considering how many people go missing worldwide, there may have been more, and when they were done, well, the Wendigo had to eat. The files I'd seen of what they had done would haunt me forever. Hydra certainly did their Nazi roots proud. I wasn't going to be the sort of person in love with carnage and killing, but the thought of Hydra dying at my hands no longer made me reflect on a knife piercing through flesh. Instead, I thought of victims on hospital beds in a bridge facility, crying as their painful prosthetic and animal limbs were being gently removed. Bucky patted me on the shoulder awkwardly. "That's good. I mean, you shouldn't start to like it or anything, but, He stopped and gave me the helpless look of a man used to all the moral sides of killing, trying to figure out how to word them. I smiled a bit at how hard he was trying to help a naive superhero like me. "Okay, so you know the plan." Professional Bucky came back in an instant. "Drop Hulk and you from above, War Machine and Defiant, taking out any escaping aircraft. I'll go in with the hard drive, sneak into the facility while everyone focuses on you, insert the hard drive, defend it for as long as it takes for the virus to finish while Hulk and you destroy and engage enemy vehicles, personnel, and heavy weapons. Once done, rendezvous with the other team and see about our next target." It was actually chilling to hear Bucky bring out the assassin in him. He nodded. "Yep, should be fun, especially since they've got nothing but tanks and gunships. Small-time stuff." "The world's really changed when that kind of firepower is considered small-time," Bucky noted. "Caveman probably had the same complaint once," I joked. "Besides, Steve, Clint, and Hartley are still representing how strong the old-school weapons can be in the right hands." Bucky frowned. "Yeah. Plus there are still assassins who use katanas and such. Guess a good knife will never really go out of style." "Katanas," I said thoughtfully. "The hand, maybe." Before I could consider that, the console in front of me began to beep, showing the location ahead. We were flying over forests, heading to a valley where the Air Force had nestled their base into. I don't know why it had been shut down, as the files I'd read hadn't focused on history as much as assets and targets, but it was now Hydra-owned. "X, take over," I said, rising up. and moving into the back. "Of course, sir," X replied. In the back, Rhodey and Bruce looked up at us. Bruce was wearing what looked like a purple skin-tight suit with some boots and armor over the chest and back, newly made yesterday, and was working on the War Machine suit with Rhodey, who was wearing his Air Force uniform despite technically now being a bridge officer. "How's she running?" I asked the pair. "Like a dream." Rhodey tapped the arms on the War Machine and watched as the right sprouted its sonic cannon while the left sprouted a sword. He tapped them again, and they pulled back into the armor, at least until Tony finishes making the next one along with his armor. "We're almost there, by the way," I said to Bruce. "You both ready?" Bruce closed his eyes, breathing deeply, then opened them. "I think so. I thought about what you said, about using my anger while also keeping calm. Hopefully we'll both be able to do that." "All right then." I walked to the back, where the door began to lower as we flew through the air, Bruce following me. The base was below us by a few thousand feet, shadowed by the forested mountains around it. Hangars, tanks, Quinjets, and gunships could be seen from the air. There were some surface-to-air missile defense systems that weren't able to detect the Defiant. I could also see some giant tanker planes, the kind used to refuel aircraft in mid-flight. I pointed at one of them. "I take the left, you take the right," I yelled over the wind rushing past us. "Sounds good," Bruce yelled back. With that, I tapped my chest, my armor sprouting over my form and covering my head with my black helmet. Then I activated the Omnitrix, flipped through the menu for a bit until I got to the big guy. Then I jumped out of the floating Quinjet from thousands of feet in the air, Bruce joining me seconds later. "Going hero!" I cried out as loudly as I possibly could as we fell together. I pressed down the dial and changed as Bruce shifted, both of us gaining hundreds of pounds of muscle in an instant, Bruce's new armor growing along with him. "4 arms!" I yelled out happily. Hulk gave me a thoughtful look as we fell before yelling as well, "Hulk!" I laughed at the idea of him copying me, and together we fell feet first into a pair of gasoline-filled tanker planes, smashing through grey steel with a crack of metal shattering under our speed and weight. The smell of fuel filled the air, pouring across the pavement, covering the both of us in the stuff. I bent metal out of the way to exit the tanker, blinking fuel out of my eyes in time to see a Hydra soldier in a black uniform staring at me. "I'm here to speak to the manager," I said with a grin. She yelled out, raising her handgun and shooting me between the 4 eyes. "Rod," I grunted in annoyance, stepping out of the tanker and gently tapping her in the head, sending her flying a good distance and rolling onto the ground. "Hulk, you okay?" The tanker plane next to mine split apart, and a wet Hulk came tearing his way out. He landed next to me, looking up at me with a grimace. "Tastes bad." "Well, yeah, buddy. It's fuel." The sound of tank treads rolling on pavement brought our attention towards the tarmac, where several tons of metal rolled towards us. 3 tanks pointed their turrets at us, with several soldiers pointing their guns. Hulk and I shared a look, then we looked over at the tanks, me flashing my fangs. "They seem pretty brave. How about we give them a round of applause?" Hulk grinned. Together, we pulled our arms back. "Thunder!" I yelled. "Clap!" Hulk cried out. We slammed out palms together, and a hurricane burst out in front of us, sending the planes we'd smashed into flying to the sides. The powerful wind hit the soldiers and sent them flying as bullets scattered in the air from accidental trigger pulls, dozens of men flying. The tanks were less affected, only get pushed back a bit. So Hulk leaped on top of one, his eyes vaguely glowing green. Hulk smash puny tank. Steel tore under green hands as he grabbed underneath the turret and pulled upwards, ripping the whole thing off the tank. Bullets bounced off Hulk's armor and skin as he jammed his fingers into the tank, tearing it in half before tossing them aside. I grabbed another tank and lifted it high, laughing at the feeling of power as I lifted over 60 tons with all the stress of lifting a small rock. In the distance, I saw a gunship try to rise into the air, only for a black dot to fly in and blow it apart with repulsor beam. With a roar, I threw the tank in my hands at another, then leaped for a Quinjet nearby. The Quinjet had been about to lift off when I slammed into it, bringing it down to slam into the tarmac. The pilots inside stared up at my grinning face in horror. You guys aren't cleared for flight. I used my bottom two hands to dig handholds into the Quinjet and climb up the thing, getting to the wings. Raw. My upper arms swung into the wings on either side, steel and electronics buckling under my fists. I unleashed punches like rain, tearing the wings off and leaving the Quinjet to spin into the ground. Suddenly, a shell slammed into the Quinjet's cockpit, sending me flying. I landed and rolled to my feet, looking at the Quinjet I'd brought down. The cockpit had been blown out, leaving the pilots dead. A bloody hand was raised in the air, still dripping. I spun to look at the tank that had fired at me, which turned its turret to face me, then fired. Apparently, my reflexes were fast as hell. I caught the shell out of the air with my right upper arm, leaning back to withstand the force of the shot before stopping, standing to glare at the tank. You Hydra punks have no loyalty, huh? I squeezed down on the shell, ignoring as it exploded in my hand and sent a shockwave outwards. Fine. I already knew you were assholes anyway. I leaped over to the tank, dodging the next shot it fired, and landed on it with a four-fisted punch that dented the front inwards, as though a meteor had hit it. In the background I could hear Hulk roaring as I tore into the tank in front of me. A Humvee flew by, followed by Hulk jumping to slam into a fighter jet and destroy. I roared in return. The two of us began the task of tearing the base apart. As we did, the Defiant flew in under cloak to drop a World War II vet where he could do the most damage. Matt Murdock, the man in blackmail. In a diner in Hell's Kitchen, Matt Murdock listened with a smile as his friend spoke. I can't believe you're still considering saying no, Foggy said, his voice incredulous. I mean, we will get to work with superheroes. They're going to pay us millions to do what we said what we'd do. Matt chuckled. Well, yeah, it is very tempting, Foggy. Tempting? I still have funny feelings in my pants, thinking about the money they offered. Matt snorted in laughter, water spilling down his nose. Foggy grinned at the reaction of his friend before sobering, the sounds of his muscles shifting, giving Matt an image of the reactions. Seriously, Matt, what's wrong? Matt thought about that for a moment. In truth, the idea was exciting, for many reasons. Money to do nothing but work in Hell's Kitchen like they wanted, enough that they could take pro bono cases even. Money he could use to fund his other job. But the whole thing was too suspicious in a lot of ways. How did Mahmoud Shashid, the man who went by Dial, know about them? More importantly, how did Mahmoud know about his other identity? Because he did. Everything about the deal screamed it, from how they'd been messaged out of the blue, the way Mahmoud's heartbeat had sped up as though he recognized him when he saw him, to the sheer amount of money being offered to two rookie lawyers with no cases of their own. He had no idea how he knew, considering blind was enough to stave off suspicion, but he did. Was the deal Mahmoud's way of controlling him somehow? Bringing him into bridge? Everyone knew that organization was taking in superhumans, and rumors on the internet said they were training them, with some conspiracy theorists claiming Bridge was building an army. Matt couldn't see everything about the deal, but part of him, his instincts, screamed to accept. Didn't mean he shouldn't be smart about this in case they were wrong. How about this? Matt said at last. Let me meet him on my own. I want to talk to him, find out what he's about. Foggy waved a hand. Dismissively, the air shifting with the movement to press against Matt's skin. I bet you just want to get an autograph from Captain America, don't you? Matt chuckled. I'm actually partial to Black Widow myself. Of course you are, because Matt Murdock can always spot the hottest girl in the room, even if he hasn't met her. Foggy's eyes made the subtle sound that indicated a role. I bet you'd somehow end up dating her too. Foggy. Oh, don't you dare, Foggy said, his voice mock angry. Matt Murdock and Natasha Romanoff. Sounds like a match made in heaven. Matt laughed, rubbing his head. Foggy became serious once more. Be careful, Matt. I might want this deal, but you're right, this came out of nowhere. As much as I like the idea of working with superheroes, we might end up suing supervillains too, which isn't exactly something law school trained us for. Foggy smiled again. More defending them, actually, but if we have to say no, I'll support you. No matter how many superheroes tell otherwise. The blind lawyer from Hell's Kitchen focused on his friend for a moment. That was the thing about Foggy. Happy-go-lucky on the outside, the sort of person people thought of as soft. Then you backed him into a corner and his humor became pointed. The steel beneath his softness revealed. There was a reason Marcy Stall found him so attractive, after all. "I'll be careful, Foggy Bear," Matt teased. Foggy raised his eyes to the sky. "Ooh, will you never let me live that down?" Matt grinned. "Not until Marshy does." Foggy threw a sugar packet at his friend Matt, letting at him and pretending to be surprised while still smiling. Agent Phil Coulson. Phil had an impression of Tony, one built up over long study and direct conversation. That impression was simple, surprisingly complicated. One would assume that was a vague description, but it was true. People assumed, even with his relatively new status as a superhero, that Tony was a childish playboy. Childish? Sure, when he was relaxed, he'd snark, joke, pout, and act like a billionaire's kid, until he no longer liked you. Suddenly, his sarcastic comments and jokes became pointed, tearing people apart as they gaped. He wouldn't pout, but frown as he absorbed the information around him and came up with a way to tear one apart, and those billions, in the end, hadn't been made by his father, no matter who claimed otherwise. His father may have given him incredible resources, but Tony's brilliance had brought Stark Industries to the incredible heights it stood at now. Anyone who assumed otherwise soon had that genius aimed at them. And in the end, Tony was a killer. Not in the way Natasha or Bucky were, but he'd killed in combat, killed for the sake of others, killed out of rage. Push him far enough, and others would find that out as well. Tony was a mixture of things: mature, childish, dangerous, genius, reckless. All of that somehow flowed in one man, which meant that when Tony ended up insisting he be in the same car as Phil, he wasn't that surprised. In dark hours of the morning before the sun would rise, Tony sat in the passenger seat while the two waited in the park near the trail Audrey was known to run on. "When was the last time you saw her?" Tony asked quietly. "About a week before I died, maybe," Phil admitted. "She was preparing for a show, think." "She misses you, you know that?" Tony said quietly. "I know, Tony, it'll hurt her, even though I didn't have a choice, the fact I took so long to make contact afterward." Phil sighed, his hands tightening on the steering wheel as he thought of Audrey. "If it helps, I'm going to tell her anyways." Tony shrugged at the glare he got. "What? You don't want the push?"
You're a terrible therapist.
Phil decided. "Bruce isn't any better," Tony noted. They sat in silence for a while longer, watching the trail. What was it like? Dying. "I mean, I've come close a couple of times. Had my heart stop, you know, but nothing real. I don't really know. I don't remember anything about what happened after that. Fury told me I was the one who actually worked on the project, that I was the one who had it shut down. I still don't know if I can forgive him or May for that." "The scary one?" Tony asked. A small smile appeared and died on Phil's face. "That's her. She apparently built my team to monitor me, to make sure I didn't go insane, all while she kept an eye on me. Maid lied to me, even if it was for my own good. I don't know how to trust her." "Kinda hypocritical of you." Tony looked over at him. "Getting mad about a spy for lying, especially considering you not telling anyone you were alive, and you know that you would have done the same thing, Coulson." Phil opened his mouth, then closed it. "Damn it. What?" "I hate when you're right about something. You act so smug." Tony laughed, Phil shaking his head in amusement. "We'll protect her, okay? No matter what this guy does." "Thanks, Tony." Frank Castle, the Punisher. Frank took a moment to marvel at how things had changed in his life. Just yesterday, he'd been able to spend some time with his wife and kids, to see them and have a good night's sleep in his own home. And now he was wearing armor more advanced than anything he'd ever had, weighing him to camouflage against the trees he was currently hiding behind, like that Predator movie he'd watched as a kid. Not to mention the man next to him. "Seeing any movement?" Captain fucking America asked him, camouflaged as well. It was a bit disturbing, hearing a voice come out of a clear shape in the air that could barely be seen. "Nothing yet, sir," Frank said, eyeing the forest along the path. In truth, Frank had been disappointed in Steve at first. The man was built like a bodybuilder and had an almost carefree attitude Frank hadn't ever seen in a commanding officer before. He acted more like a fellow soldier, a pretty green one at that. Then they were out in the field, and he seemed to transform into the perfect soldier every American knew him to be. Even now, standing next to him, Frank could barely believe the "oh shucks nice guy" from earlier was the calm military commander in the forest right now. "Punisher," Captain America said, "give me your assessment. If you were Hydra, how would you aid Marcus Daniels?" Frank thought about that for a moment. "I don't know. I'm not used to all this superhero stuff, sir. Dark Force, repulsors, Hulk, aliens. I just point and shoot. Take my word for it, soldier. It's the same as any other war. The old tactics still apply, they just get flexible. Think of Blackout as you would any heavy unit. Hydra's target is Audrey, so the World War II vet trailed off." Frank looked around the forest, switching between his visual aids going from thermal to X-ray. He thought carefully. Marcus will want to intercept Audrey, so he'll have Hydra surround her. He's unstable, so instead of knocking her out and taking her with him, he'll try to talk it out. We don't know who's leading Hydra's forces or how involved Marcus is with Hydra, but if they are working together, Frank pointed to the north, they'll surround the area with some supporting teams. This whole thing is too showy, so they're probably trying to keep this guy happy by following his lead. If it was me, I'd send in a small team to kidnap her in the middle of the night, no one the wiser. Her apartment is unguarded, has been for the past 2 days, with only a basic alarm. Move in with 3 guys, with more on overwatch, inject her with a sedative while she sleeps, move her out of the window, take her home. The fact they're being this sloppy tells me that someone powerful but sloppy is in charge. Some fuck that doesn't know what he's doing, just what he wants. "I know the type," Captain America said, apparently undisturbed by Castle's cold assessment of the situation. "As it is, they'll have most of their soldiers keep the rest behind Blackout to support him, while also using him as protection, the only safe move while being this sloppy. Like a tank charging across the trenches with soldiers defending it. Same with the other one." "Other one?" Captain America asked. "There will be one more," Frank said, instinct guiding him. "If they can spare it, another enhanced to help Blackout. If Hydra is really gathering them to fight us off, they won't just risk sending one of them on their own. Another enhanced one they feel can back this one up enough to keep them from being captured. It's risky, riskier than I'd want to do, but I think it's what Hydra will do. Just a hunch, sir." "Might be true. What do you think, Clint?" Captain America asked. A shadow above them shifted in the treetops. He could be right. Silence filled the air a moment longer. Frank breathed quietly, grip tightening on his BCW, then loosening again. The wind blew through the trees and Audrey Nathan began her run. "James Bucky Barnes, Nomad." Bucky landed quietly in the shadow of the control tower that overlooked the base, where no one could see him. He took a moment to watch as Hulk and, what did Dial call him, Forearms? Bucky watched as the 2 massive monsters played with tanks. They were currently throwing a tank between each other in an impromptu game of catch. It took Bucky back, watching that, to days as a kid in Brooklyn, playing with Steve on his team. He was terrible, but damned if he wasn't determined. Of course, once they'd played a couple of games after Steve had gotten his powers, Bucky ended up feeling like the weak link on the team. It was kind of hilarious, actually. Bucky put aside those thoughts as Forearms batted a Quinjet thrown by Hulk into the distance with a bat made from a crumpled tank turret. Instead, he looked over at the door to the watchtower. His job was simple. Enter the tower, get to a computer, insert a hard drive, and defend it until X and Jarvis had hacked their way in and found Hydra's main base of operations. He leaned towards the keypad next to the door, one with green glowing buttons. He had all sorts of tools made to bypass devices like this in his armor now, but Bucky jammed his metal arm into the doorframe, tightened his grip on the door itself, and proceeded to rip the whole thing off its hinges where it dropped to the ground with a clang. Alarms were already ringing out across the base, the sounds of destruction echoing even from over here. There was no need to waste time trying to be clandestine on the keypad when Four Arms, Hulk, and War Machine were already causing a ruckus. He entered, his rifle up and at the ready. Nothing was there but a hallway leading to stairs. "This is Nomad. I'm in the control tower now," Bucky said quietly. "War Machine, I read you," Rhodey said, the only other professional in the group. "Continuing to act as air support, but let me know if you need backup." "Copy that, War Machine." Nomad out, Bucky started up the stairs, moving at a fast clip. As he did, he activated his X-ray vision, his eyes adjusting to the blue-white vision. With long hours of practice, he could see two guards a floor up, waiting to surprise intruders with a hail of bullets. Bucky strode up to the floor, activated the silenced mode on his rifle and took aim. He waited for the flying form of War Machine to pass with a loud burst of sound. Two bullets went through drywall and entered the heads of the guards. Bucky felt a bit of satisfaction. While silencers only made it hard to spot where the noise was coming from, rather than totally muffling it, nothing on Earth can truly silence a gun. The tech of the BCW made such sound whisper quiet. Along with a combination of War Machine flying past and the other gunshots outside, Bucky doubted anyone would notice something was up unless they checked up on the guards in question. Bucky moved higher through the floors, switching between his thermal and X-ray vision, moving carefully and quickly. He ignored several floors full of personnel and soldiers, going for the top. "Can you hack them yet?" "I am unable to." The AI actually sounded frustrated. "Samuel Stern's firewalls are adapting. I can destroy them with a direct line." "You'll get it." Bucky reached for his waist as he came to the final floor, pulling out a round object with a magnet on the flat side. He pressed it against the door and stepped back, raising his left hand up. Atoms flowed to create a massive tower shield from his arm, as thick as 2 thumbs and chest high. He hefted it, aiming his gun with his right hand as he sent a signal to the object. It exploded inwards with incredible power, turning the door to ashes. Bucky took the shockwaves on his shield and armor, rushing into the room as soon as the explosion passed. The top floor of the control tower had windows looking out onto the base all around the room, with consoles and computers everywhere displaying all manner things such as radar. There were 10 guards and about a dozen personnel, several of them screaming or holding hands up to block the smoke caused by the explosion. Bucky aimed and shot quickly. One guard went down, then another. A man ducked behind some computers, raising his gun over them to spray and pray. Bucky ignored him, moving on. 1 shot, 1 kill. 1 shot, 1 kill. The guards aimed and fired at Bucky only for their bullets to bounce harmlessly off his shield. Some would think it sad. In some ways, Bucky was an enhanced cyborg, trained in assassination by the most ruthless people in history, covered in the most sophisticated armor ever designed without being worn by Tony Stark. The guards were men with guns in the end. Bucky felt no sympathy for the men. Hydra had made their choice in this case. He killed them all with machine-like proficiency. Striding into the room, one of the men, a dark-skinned man with wide eyes, tried to tackle him. Bucky shot out his kneecaps, then fired one into the man's head, noting how much ammo he had left. Plenty left for the others. All the targets were dead when he was done. Bucky moved to the computers and reached for his waist once more, taking a small device out and plugging it into the USB port. "I'm in." "One moment," X said politely. "Jarvis and I are working. We're making contact, uploading virus, downloading files." Bucky raised his shield and faced the door, waiting patiently. He kept his head on a swivel, watching the windows as well. Nothing to do but be patient. He was good at being patient. "Mahmoud Shani Dale." "Rag." I leaped into a hangar, diving into a cargo plane's nose. My fingers tore into the nose, ripping through it. Once a hole was big enough to let me in, I dug into the rest of the mechanics, red hands rapidly pulling apart steel and wires to get into the plane. I heard the cockpit collapse behind me in a rush of squealing metal. Sparks surrounded me, and I left 4-fingered handholds in my passage into the plane. My head ripped into the cargo hold, where I grinned bloodthirstily at the Hydra soldiers waiting for me. "Here's Johnny." One man let out a loud screech of horror when I said that. Not a fan of movies, I guess. Once inside, I went wild. I punched everything I could see, ignoring the bullets bouncing off my skin to instead punch the cargo, rip apart the plane, and gently sent Hydra soldiers flying as I rammed through the cargo doors back into the hangar. My assault had a purpose. The hangar the plane I was currently destroying was in happened to be far from the main control tower. Any forces getting diverted would be sent far from the tower, giving Bucky less opposition to deal with. Hulk smashed down through the roof and landed next to me as the plane exploded behind us. War Machine flew over to join us as well. "How we doing, Rhodey?" I asked. "We should be good." Director Hill is on her way, and most of the Hydra forces on the base are. A shell slammed into me in the middle of his sentence. The force of the shot hitting my chest sent me back a couple steps from not seeing it coming and feeling kinda like what a weak punch felt like when I was human. "Well, most of them are done," Rhodey finished, the three of us looking at the incoming group of tanks and APCs, 5 and 8 respectively, joined by a gunship flying in the air and heading towards the hangar. "Oh, you son of—" I was cut off when Hulk leaped into the air, roaring. "You hurt Hulk, friend," with that battle cry. Hulk slammed into the gunship, causing it to spin wildly in the air and bringing it down with incredible force as he roared triumphantly. "Hulk, I'm not— Wow, he's really tearing into that thing." I blinked as Hulk started tearing big handholds out of the gunship, the helicopter's rotors smacking into him and bending fruitlessly. "Better them than us," Rhodey said, raising his arms. "Come on." He fired a repulsor beam that slammed into one of the APCs, sending it skittering. "Let's go work for a living." With a nod in response, I sprinted forward, running through a hail of gunfire before tackling a tank, lifting the front and flipping it upside down before kicking it away. Hulk tossed another tank for me to punch out of the air while War Machine flew under my arms to fire a barrage of bullets at a Hydra soldier, aiming a rocket launcher at me. We moved forward, carving a path through the Hydra soldiers. I leaped up to grab a Quinjet out of the sky, slamming it into the ground in a slam-dunk motion. War Machine unleashed a barrage of explosions on a group of Henvies with heavy machine guns. Hulk used a tank turret like a warhammer, destroying more vehicles with a pleased, angry grin on his face. Then we got the message. "This is Director Hill, we're on our way," our leader said over the comms. "Negative, Director," X said in response. "There are several active anti-aircraft weapon emplacements around the base that could prove deadly to any landing force not properly cloaked. I'll work on shutting them down while in the system." That gave me an idea as I ripped the treads of a tank and tossed them to Hulk, who used them as a whip to destroy the rotors of a helicopter. "I know a faster way that will hamper the whole base," I said as firmly as I could, trying to seem leadery. "X, are they all connected to the same power source?" "Yes, sir. A series of generators to the north of your position." "Then I'll get them." I tapped the Omnitrix symbol on my chest. "Fast track. See you guys in a bit," I yelled to War Machine and Hulk, the latter waving his tank turret warhammer. With that, I sped away to the north. In mere seconds, I was on the other side of the base. A Hydra soldier was yelling into a walkie-talkie as I ran by. I punched him aside, sending him flying. A little further was an electrical plant, the kind I'd torn apart in Just Cause 3 1,000 times before, with the tall spires, wires, and large steel boxes, all in an area as large as an apartment building. "Directly ahead, sir," X informed me. "I see it," I replied, tapping the Omnitrix. Feedback. In the form of the tall and black-skinned Kondokiad, I could feel the power around me flowing between the wires. I grinned toothily and pointed my hands at them. In a burst of light, blue electricity flowed from the metal spires, wires, and boxes and into the air. "Fust, cat, fust," was the crackling sound it made as it slammed into the plug like extensions on my fingertips. "Ha ha ha," I laughed, the feeling of energy flowing into my body getting to the edges of intoxicating, like feeling a hot tub full of minerals bubbling against your skin, that all-over rejuvenating tingle all throughout my body. "The anti-aircraft emplacements are shutting down, but I suggest you continue taking their power," X said. "Troops are heading to attack you, sir, coming from the southeast. I suggest neutralizing them." I nodded, still taking power from the generators. then looked over to the southeast. I could see soldiers running towards me, backdropped by the forest that surrounded the base. I thought of changing forms before dismissing the idea. Instead, I turned my left hand from where it had been absorbing electricity to raise it into the sky as I kept pulling power in with my right hand. About 10 guys. I stared at the group for a moment. Then I sent power through my body over my head, the tendrils on my head lifting up. An orb of blue power gathered over my head, growing to the size of a beach ball. I reared back and threw it at the group. They tried to scatter when they saw what I was doing, but few things can actually outspeed lightning. The blue ball grew in the middle of its journey and slammed into every single one of them in a wave of power. Electricity soaked them with hundreds of thousands of volts. I watched with a neutral face as they shook on the ground from muscles clenched by lightning. Then I turned back to the generators. I took comfort in the feeling of electricity, absorbing it until there was nothing left to pull. "Very good, sir. All weapon emplacements have been shut down along with the vast majority of enemy systems in around the base," Jarvis said, surprising me. "Thanks, Jarvis. How's X?" "I'm doing well, sir. The virus has done its work, and we will be interpreting the data." I turned away from the plant and blasted the tarmac beneath me, launching myself into the air on jets of lightning to land on top of a 3-story building 40 feet away. I looked out over the forest to where a fleet of Quinjets was flying towards the base, with US military vehicles driving on the roads through the forest to get to us. "We've won, sir." "This fight," I smiled a bit, looking out over the forest as War Machine flew to land behind me. A loud crack of concrete told me Hulk had done the same. I took note of the powerful energy I could feel coming from them, but focused on the view. After this, though, the real fight starts again.
Why with?
The three of us stood on the roof, watching our reinforcements arrive. Audrey stretched underneath the light she'd been using as her starting point for her run for years. The cellist was wearing a black hoodie and grey yoga pants, her running shoes a bit beat up, but still serviceable. She looked up at the dark morning sky, the sun still a few hours from rising, before taking out her phone and flipping through her playlist, smiling as the familiar sound of classical music began to play. She truly loved listening to music almost as much as playing it. Hearing each string of a violin and cello get plucked, hearing the wind instruments join in as a skilled drummer took the song along its path. There was a beauty to it, something that spoke to Audrey. She began to jog, shivering slightly at the chill that suddenly rose in the air as she ran. The beginning of the song played with the steps of her feet, with the beat of her heart, Gustav Holst Mars, the bringer of war, playing. The beginning drums and trombones started to pick up. Then the tubas, violins, picking up with each step she took on her run through the dark forest. Then the music started to sputter about 5 minutes in, and whining crackle coming from her earphones. She frowned, taking her phone out to look at it. The phone died, and so did the path lights around her. Confusion filled her for a moment, as a cold wind floated around her, the shadows lengthening. Then a memory from long ago filled her with fear. She turned around. The sight behind her filled her with fear and horror. Marcus Daniels was a tall, thin man, with combed back hair, sallow eyes, wearing a dark, long coat that seemed to absorb the light around him. He strode towards her, a terrifying look in his eyes that she remembered. As though he had seen something beautiful, he wanted to make his at all costs. The shadows around them lengthened. Beside him was someone she didn't recognize, a young man with a grey hoodie. His face, in some ways, was more terrifying than Marcus's. It was blank, uncaring, eyeing her with no emotion. The cold wind picked up. At the sight of her superhuman stalker's return, she turned and ran as fast as she could. "Frank Castle, Punisher." "Contact," Frank said into his mic softly, moving towards his target. Hydra in dark green and brown gear, moving through the forest as quietly as they could. They shone to his thermal vision, 9 men moving as one towards where Audrey had begun her run. Frank and the 3 other bridge elites circled around them, moving in silently under cloak. Hawkeye was in the treetops, flitting through the forest branches like some elf from a fantasy movie. Captain America was next to him, moving even more skillfully along than Frank was. At the moment before Frank struck, he found himself humming something his daughter had taught him for some reason. One batch, two batch, a strange thing to have in his head before he killed someone. He put it aside. He'd see her later. For now, he had work to do. Frank pulled out his Excalibur as the handle grew into a long Bowie knife, moving towards the Hydra soldier in front of him. "Now," Captain America whispered softly. Frank grabbed his target around the mouth and stabbed him in the back, the long blade slicing into his enemy's heart. Captain America grabbed his own target's head and twisted. The other bridge elites went for knife stabs as well, one of them slicing a Hydra soldier's throat out. 5 Hydra soldiers went down, leaving 3 to turn in surprise. Even as quiet as they were, the bridge elites and Cap still made enough noise to grab attention, which is what Hawkeye had been counting on. He fired 3 times in a brief second. 2 arrows killed their target, while the last was an Icer-tipped arrow knocking out the target. 2 bridge elites rushed in while Frank looked towards Audrey, his thermal vision showing her and 2 other things. Strange, negative beings in the shape of humans, only seen by how the warmth in the surrounding area acted. One seemed to draw in the warmth and energy around it. The other seemed to do the opposite, somehow radiating in a way that almost— "I hate when I'm right sometimes," Frank whispered. "Sir, too enhanced." Mockingbird, Captain America said quickly. "Get Audrey out. Tony, move in." "Audrey, Nathan, please," Daniels yelled as she ran away. "You have to come with me. I can make us happy." Audrey ran faster. She ignored the chill in the air, the shadows surrounding her as tears ran down her cheeks. Again, the monster was back. The man who claimed to love her without even knowing her, her monstrous stalker. She was in a nightmare again, and there was no one to— A motorcycle sped out of the forest, spinning to join her. The woman on it, a tall blonde, looked at her. "I'm with Bridge, get on." Audrey felt fresh tears fall as she hastily got on the motorcycle, barely listening to her words and simply choosing the fastest means of escape. "No," Marcus yelled, rushing after her. "Not again! Stop them!" The last was yelled at the young man next to him, who raised his hands. Something fell out of the sky to land between the women on the motorcycle and the 2 men following. When it rose up, Audrey felt something within her relax. "Dude, can't you take a hint?" Wearing gold and black armor that was mirror-polished to perfection, the familiar figure of the Iron Man suit Audrey had seen on the news stood tall. "She's so not into you. Try Tinder, find a girl who likes black paint, dark shadows, and My Chemical Romance." "See you, Tony?" The woman Audrey was clutching yelled, twisting the throttle and taking off quickly into the night. "Hold tight. We'll keep you safe." "Thank you," Audrey whimpered, feeling shame for how scared she'd been, but still holding tightly to the waist of the woman who'd saved her. "Thank you, Agent Phil Coulson." Phil ran out to join Tony as soon as Audrey was safe, so focused on her that he'd nearly forgotten his own role. "Daniels," Phil yelled as he joined Tony. "Surrender, please. We just want to keep you safe and keep you from hurting Donnie." The figure next to Daniels didn't respond, but Phil knew who he was. "Wait, Donnie Gill?" Tony stared, surprised. If Phil had to guess, Tony was probably looking at files on Donnie from the HUD in his helmet. The Blizzard Kid. The young man with a newly shorn head only stared placidly. "Enough!" Marcus yelled and raged. "You're the one who put me away, but they made me stronger," he smiled sadistically, raising his hands. "Strong enough to kill you." With that insane scream, Daniels fired a blast of power. The dark force seemed to absorb the world around it as it flew towards Phil, only visible because it sucked in the light around it. Tony fired a ray of concentrated light at the beam, stopping it in its tracks. The dark force and light rays fought for a moment, filling the area with shining light and wisps of shadow. Daniels yelled in rage as the bright gold sections on Tony's armor glimmered against beneath the black sections, illuminated by the strobing lights. A tiny explosion filled the air, and Daniels stopped, panting in rage. Iron Man stopped as well. "We don't want to fight you," Tony said calmly. "But we will if we have to," Phil added sadly, raising his icer pistol to aim. "Surrender." "No," Marcus said, his eyes insane with rage. Blizzard, take the Iron Man. Donnie lifted a hand up and narrowed his eyes. A cloudy line of ice flew from Donnie's and into Tony at what had to be sonic speeds. Tony yelled out as he was sent flying back, covered in chunks of ice that began to grow over him. He struggled to move as Donnie kept shooting him. Then Daniels joined in, blasting his own powers. The cold beam of ice flowed with the shadows to become a strangely beautiful attack made of blue-white ice and black ink, the two negative energies pushing Iron Man back further. Phil raised his gun and fired at Daniels, only to be blasted back by an errant shot of dark force that felt like it cracked his sternum. "Kill him," Daniels yelled, joining in with a still emotionless Donnie. "Kill him." "Man, screw you," Tony yelled, spinning to blast a beam that fought back against the two superhumans' attacks. He roared, feet skittering, as the forest around them and pavement beneath began to get covered in frost. Then loud gunshots began to echo from the forest around them. "Tony, Phil, we're on our way. Just hold on," Steve yelled over the comms. "Hydra's trying to stop us." Daniels spat to the side. "Damn, fine. Blizzard." Donnie, without a shift of expression, blasted the ground at the same time as Daniels. An explosion of cold shadow surrounded them, blinding Phil and Tony. Iron Man fired at the explosion with his repulsors of concentrated light, made specifically to overload Daniels, struggling with the ice covering his form and making it harder to move. But when the obscuring ice dust and shadows faded, Daniels and Donnie were gone. "Fuck!" Phil yelled in an uncharacteristic burst of anger, struggling to his feet. "Phil!" Steve ran over, still cloaked, but slowly coming into view as he joined them. "Tony? What happened?" Tony swore, rising to his feet with a crack of ice falling from his armor to hit the floor, filled the air. "They ran away. We could have had them, but I got surprised by their whole attack combo thing. We should get one of those." "Sir!" Frank Castle joined them, wearing his heavy armor. Phil noted the black colors and the white skull emblazoned on the chest, looking almost spray-painted onto him. 15 Hydra dead or captured. The rest ran with Daniels and Donnie. Steve shook his head. "Okay, this is still a win. We got Audrey out, and we know about Donnie. Reconvene at the bus, and we'll find a way to track them, keep them from their target." Steve looked around as his camouflage dropped away, revealing the red, white, and blue armor he was now wearing, his face concealed by a faceless helm that faded to its trademark shape. "The day's just getting started. Jarvis, is the other team finished?" "Yes, Captain," Jarvis responded. "They will be joining you soon." "Let them know about Donald Gill," Steve said calmly. "Okay." Tony's faceplate rose up, revealing his face, eyes glimmering with a darkness matching Daniels. "He won't get away. Not again." "No," Phil said, eyes meeting Tony with the same dark thoughts. "No, he won't." Hydra had taken Trip, tried to take S.H.I.E.L.D., taken Ward before he'd even met him. They would not take Audrey. Agent Phil Coulson. A loud crack filled the air as Phil fell back against a wall, his cheek burning in pain. What really hurt was look in Audrey's face. "You let me think you were dead," Audrey yelled, her eyes glaring even as tears poured down her cheeks and she lowered her hand. Phil looked away from her. "I went to your funeral. Audrey shuddered, staring at Phil as though she didn't know if she was going to slap him again or not. "Why? Couldn't you even call me? Just let me know that you were alive?" Phil opened his mouth but found himself unable to respond. Tony nudged him with his elbow. Phil looked at the billionaire, who raised an eyebrow at him. The billionaire cellist and spy was standing in Phil's office on the bus, the massive cargo plane Coulson's team used as a mobile headquarters. "I did die," Phil finally said weakly. "I was brought back through an experimental project." "How long ago?" Audrey asked. "What?" Phil said, confused. "How long ago were you brought back?" Audrey said angrily. "August," Phil said softly. "I've been awake since August." 5 months, Audrey shook her head, more tears falling down her cheeks as her fists shook. "You were alive for 5 months, and you just let me think you were dead." Audrey, Phil stepped forward with his hands out. She slapped them away, shaking her head. "No, don't touch me. I need time to think." Her voice was shaky. Phil gave Tony a helpless look. Tony shook his head, clearly at a loss. Phil turned back to Audrey. Okay, we have some rooms on the plane. I have teams watching your apartment, but it's safest if you stay with us. She nodded, still not looking at Phil. A deep pain filled him at the sight of the woman he loved, unable to look at him. He walked to his desk and pushed a button. Simmons, can you come to my office? The door opened fast enough that Phil had to guess Simmons had been extremely close by. The British scientist gave everyone in the room a bright smile as she entered. Hello, sir. How can I help? Phil took a moment to thank God for the bright smile gifted to Gemma Simmons when Audrey seemed to relax at the sight of it. Can you show ordered Miss Nathan to a room? She'll be staying with us for a bit. Of course, sir, Simmons smiled at Audrey, guiding her out of the room. Audrey looked back at Phil. They met eyes. Then the door closed. That could have gone worse, Tony said in a light tone. Speaking as a guy who's hurt the feelings of a few women before. A few, Phil said spitefully, uncaring of how petty he sounded for a moment. I've lived a full life, Tony said without a hint of shame. Focus on our work, Phil's voice was heavy, but determined. What happened with your armor? I thought your suit was made to fight Daniel. It was, Tony said, with a grimace. Based what SHIELD and Hydra tests showed, and with Bruce and Fitz helping me with the Gamma Quantum Power Reserve, I was able to pour enough energy into my shots to shut him down. But Jack Frost surprised the hell out of me, Tony admitted, speaking about Donnie. The Dark Force suit wasn't designed to take such fast temperature drops. Plus, I thought the kid's powers were based on touch. Since when could he shoot snowstorms at people? Nothing on record said he could, at least something Hydra did to him, Phil mused. We'll look into it. As for those combined attacks they did, I have scans in the armor. All I can say is that it kinda makes sense that the two powers that remove light and heat work so well together, Tony said. I'll go over it with Geek Squad, see what we can do. As for Donnie, Rhodey and I fought a guy with a suit that used heat-based weapons a while back, called himself the Melter. Why do the bad guys always pick such dumb names? Phil mused, though his heart wasn't in it. Tony smiled quickly but continued as though he hadn't spoken. I've got some specs on the armor the guy used. If we work it out, I think we can upgrade our armor to counter Jack Frost the next time around. How far are the others? They're en route over Wyoming. Should be here soon. Phil grabbed some files on his desk and went to walk out of the room, Tony following. And in the meantime, what about Audrey? Tony asked. The priority is tracking down and stopping Daniels. A part of Phil was screaming at him to go to Audrey, to explain, to yell back at her, to say or do something. I'll talk to her when it's done. In the meantime, Natasha took the others to Audrey's apartment. Hydra is watching the apartment, so they'll take care of that. Phil shook his head. Natasha Romanov, Black Widow. Natasha giggled inanely as she walked down the street. Jennifer, you aren't serious. Melinda May giggled just as inanely while they walked together. Oh, sweetie, I'm always serious about sex. Ah, Bobby, with a scandalized look on her face, slapped May's shoulder. Jennifer, you're so bad. The three spies were dressed in casual clothes, the sort older women often wore when out with their girlfriends. They were walking down a sidewalk in front of an apartment building, acting more like the stereotypical image of high school cheerleaders than anything. They walked past a blue van parked at the entrance, still giggling. The man and woman in the front of the van eyed the three momentarily, then dismissed them. Natasha, May, and Bobby strode into the building's doors. Instantly, all three women stopped laughing. One van, Natasha mused, they aren't putting a lot of resources into the perimeter. I hate these clothes, May growled, looking down at herself. Bobby and Natasha shared a smile at that. How do you think we should play this? Bobby asked the others. Take out the van first, Natasha suggested. When the others nodded, she turned back with them to go towards the doors. Jarvis, nail their comms. The second the apartment doors opened, they were giggling once more. The man and woman in the van glanced at them, confused as the group walked up. Excuse me? Natasha asked, leaning in to speak with the female driver through the window. Bobby walked around to the back of the van. How long have you worked for Hydra? The female driver and male passenger exploded into motion. The driver pulled out a knife and stabbed at Natasha's throat. Natasha leaned aside and grabbed the driver's arm as it passed, pulling her in before twisting her arm and stabbing the driver in the shoulder with her own knife, the woman barely letting out a scream before Natasha grabbed her hair and slammed the woman's head into the steering wheel with brutal force. The passenger had hopped out of the car trying to help his ally, only for May to kick the door, slamming it into him and sending him to the ground. The man rolled and faced May, punching at her. May blocked the first punch on her forearm, parried another punch, then kicked the man's knee, shattering the cap and sending him to his knees. The man shouted in pain and reached for his sidearm, but May moved forward with a flying knee to the face, knocking him out. The back doors of the van opened to eject two men carrying submachine guns. Bobby was waiting. With a snap of her fingers, atoms flowed from under her shirt to enter her palms, forming solid batons. When the two men aimed at her, she smacked their guns aside, then kicked one in the gut, sending him back into the van. The other man raised his gun again. Before his finger could tighten on the trigger, Bobby had swung a baton into his forehead with brutal force. As he went down, his ally rose up to aim at Bobby, who threw her other baton at him, knocking him out as well. "Four down," Natasha said calmly. "Let's go in and find some more." Twirling her batons, Bobby stepped towards the doors, Natasha and May following. Mahmud Shahid, Diyar. When we arrived in Portland, we landed the Defiant near the bus at an airfield set aside for our operations there. Bucky joined Cap, Clint, and Frank Castle, while Rhodey, Bruce, and I joined the others to get a debrief. That's where we heard about Donnie from Coulson and Tony as Fitz and Simmons sat nearby. I didn't know what to think of that. I hadn't encountered the supervillain known as Blizzard much in the comics. I think maybe he'd been partnered with a speedster or something. Or was that Aqueduct? Either way, Donnie hadn't been a kid or brainwashed. "Can we do anything for him?" Rhodey asked when Coulson finished explaining things, looking at Tony and me. "Hell yeah," I said confidently. "All we have to do is knock him out and put him into the exorcism machine." "First, we aren't calling it that," Tony said. "It's dumb, and you're dumb for thinking of it." I mock-glared at him, getting a smirk in return. "But yeah, even if they did improve the process, we should be able to help him. It's just a matter of finding him. As for Daniels, he was stronger than expected, but the Dark Force armor can still beat him." "But that might not be how things play out," Coulson said. "Hill says Jarvis and X are about to find Hydra's true base. The Avengers and Bridge will need to be there once it's found." "What, we're leaving?" Fitz asked, surprised. Coulson looked over at him, the agent's arms crossed. "Not all of us. Hill told me she's leaving Dial and Tony to help us. Both of them can run after the others once everything is done with," he said simply, his arms tightening slightly on themselves. "Everyone else is to head out to assault the base." "We're all you need," I said, looking at Tony. "We might need to go ahead with Project Azimuth." Tony, Bruce, Fitz, and Simmons stared at me. "Are you sure?" Bruce asked. "You said—" "I know," I said with a frown. "But it's worth a try. As long as we're careful, nothing should go wrong. No hammering or anything." "Didn't you only want to do that in case of, Fitz waved his hand, struggling to find the words. "An apocalypse?" Simmons added, Fitz snapping his fingers and pointing at her as agreement. "Wait, what?" Rhodey looked around. "What the hell are we talking about here?" "It's not that bad," I said with a sigh. "Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't apocalypses pretty damn bad?" Coulson asked me. I shifted uncomfortably under the attention. "Tony, what are they talking about?" "Trying to access the alien to unlock aliens on purpose," Tony said, eyeing the Omnitrix. "Is that possible?" Rhodey asked, moving forward to look at my watch as well. "Yes and no," I said with a sigh. The watch was made by a guy whose whole species make our greatest scientists look like toddlers, hell, toddlers of monkeys at the worst. And this guy was a genius among those geniuses, with an intellect beyond that. Hacking the watch is practically impossible without being smart enough, so I always kept the idea of unlocking all the aliens on her on my own, on the back burner. But I only want to unlock 2 aliens, one to counter Donnie and or Daniels, the other for the fight with Hydra. In that case, why not aim for that super-powered one you told us about? Alien X. You were kinda vague about what he can do, except badass of badasses. Tony said, quoting me exactly. Alien X is not something I'd reach for. First, it takes time to master it if it's possible at all for me. After all, who said Bellicus and Serena wouldn't just ignore me in a fit of anger? Second, there are only a few things that would make me use it. Hydra isn't anywhere on that list. If every bit of power Hydra ever got together in one person, empowered beyond anything in existence, Alien X would still wipe it out. Tony shrugged at that statement, apparently not super invested in the idea, while everyone else looked either wide-eyed or like they were wondering if I was exaggerating. Instead, Tony looked at Phil. You're in charge, Phil. What do we do? What's the worst that can happen? Phil asked me seriously. I opened my mouth, then closed it, choosing to say nothing. I figured it was safe to at least study the watch, figure out how to manipulate it, but the Omnitrix did have a self-destruct, a universe-destroying one. I was pretty sure, based on my own experience and the show itself, the Omnitrix wouldn't simply destroy the universe unless really pressed or damaged a great deal, but I didn't know for sure. Phil eyed me for a moment, reading my hesitance before speaking. Tony, work on your armor. Dial, I don't want you doing anything with that watch. If you can't even tell me the risk, that means you aren't sure, he said simply. I nodded slowly, sighing. In the meantime, we'll work on tracking Daniels and Gil. Fitzsimmons, Bruce, you both will work to find them. Understood. I nodded but was still thinking. I couldn't activate Project Azimuth on my own, but I could at least try to mess with the watch on my own. Ben had accidentally discovered the master control program as a 10-year-old child. None of my work with the watch had done anything before, but maybe, with a bit of work and time, I could find one of the powers of the watch on my own. Even a new random alien was beneficial in most cases. What are you going to do to your armor? Bruce asked Tony. Well, there was this guy who went by the Melter a few years back, Tony said with a grin. Oh yeah, Rhodey said, cocking his head. I remember when I beat that guy. Tony blinked. Excuse me? I beat that guy? What? Did you get a concussion? I won the bet. Rhodey, don't be jealous that you couldn't handle the guy. Tony walked away. Rhodey following him as Bruce ran to join them. Who the hell is the Melter? Bruce called after the bickering duo, leaving the rest of us to watch the three friends leave. Donald, Donny, Gil, Blizzard. In a Quinjet cloaked in the airfield at the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in McMinnville, Oregon, Donny Gill watched with no emotions as Marcus Daniels yelled at a Hydra commander dressed in black camo gear. Donny stood to the side as they snarled at each other. We are not leaving, Marcus screamed. The Hydra commander snarled. We have no choice. The Avengers are here, and Bridge is more advanced than we expected. We can't fight them. Daniels threw his hands up and turned away, frustrated. Strucker promised me Audrey. He promised me if I worked for Hydra I could get her. Now I have the chance to kill the man who kept me from her, to get her back, and you want to run. I wanted to do this quietly and professionally from the start, but you insisted on making a big show of it. Now, the commander got in Daniels' face. It is impossible. Daniels turned to look at Donny. We have me and we have Blizzard. That is more than... How inflated is your ego? The Hydra commander asked, stunned. It's the Avengers. Worse, it's the Avengers with new members. Strucker only wants to fight them when we have a full force. Maybe if you were joined by the others, but right now we... He stopped, reaching for his ear. After a moment of listening, the Hydra commander shook his head. Our teams at Ms. Nathan's apartments were taken out. We have no eyes there anymore. We're pulling out. I'm not risking my people for your crazy obsession with this woman. A blast of black energy slammed into the commander, sending him flying until he hit the wall behind him. The commander tried to rise, only for Marcus to grab his face. No, not crazy, Marcus said, watching as the commander's face paled, blackness flowing through his veins as his life force was sucked out. I'm in love, although I suppose everyone who's in love is a little crazy. Daniels tossed aside the commander's lifeless body, looking over at Donny. How about you? Donny finally moved, stepping forward. I was told to follow your orders implicitly. My compliance will be rewarded. Daniels smiled. Yeah, it will. And my orders are to kill every other Hydra soldier here. If they won't help, I've got no use for them. I think it's about time we consider going independent. Donnie turned to go towards the door, Daniels following. Mahmoud Shahed died. I twisted at the Omnitrix, working at the menu in the lounge on the bus. I'd spent so much time with the thing, but I still had no idea how to use the more advanced functions. There was just so much. I'd tried to use voice commands, switched between aliens quickly, tapped and manipulated the menu of aliens, but nothing. If I could unlock aliens, well, then I'd be unstoppable. I was aiming for Heat Blast, NRG, or Big Chill. Aliens who could no-sell Blizzard. Swamp Fire could do it with some trouble, but his plant nature made it possible to freeze those sections, break them off, and constantly regenerating would be taxing over time. He'd be my go-to in the fight if I had no choice, and he was a damn good choice anyway, but if I could unlock an alien that could more easily counter Donnie, it would be worth it. Hey! I looked up to see Steve enter the room, giving me a smile. What are you doing? Messing with my watch, I admitted, putting it away. Isn't that dangerous? Steve asked with a frown. Nah, it's like messing with your universal remote until you figure it out. Just the Omnitrix is a lot more complicated. Plus, it was only really dangerous if I took a screwdriver to it or smashed it into stuff. Ben had been a good kid, but damn if he wasn't an impulsive one. How about you, Induce? Getting ready to leave, Steve said. You and Tony are going to be the only Avengers on this mission soon. We'll catch up later, I said simply. Steve nodded, smiling. For a moment, there was an awkward silence. Was that it? I asked nervously. When imagining myself standing in front of one of my heroes, I'd somehow never thought I'd find things awkward. No, it's just hard to believe. We're almost done. Hydra is almost finished. Steve shook his head. It's a weird feeling. Yeah, I think we're going to win too, I admitted. I mean, we've become pretty strong as a group. I think so too, Steve said. But we can't relax. Even if Hydra is beaten, we'll still be needed. For a moment, just a moment, he looked strange, like a combination of tired and lost, as though he was afraid. I had no idea what he was afraid of, though. Afraid of Hydra? Afraid of any threats after? What the hell could Captain America, the most badass patriot in history, be afraid of? Before I could say anything, he coughed, turning away. See you after you're done, Mahmoud. Yeah, leave some Hydra for me and Tony. Okay? Steve didn't answer, leaving me to think. I knew he was capable of fear. He was human in the end. But he was also brave. People made jokes about him getting his powers from steroids back on my world, but that wasn't fair. Steve was exceptional for his strength of character and strong beliefs even before he'd been injected. Anybody who had spoken to Bucky would know it, and I was willing to be Peggy, would back him up on that. Red Skull, Loki, Winter Soldier, Galactus, Thanos, no matter who it was, I'd never believed for one moment that Steve would have given up against them, even without the serum enhancement. He would fight no matter what, whether as a 90-pound weakling or a 200-plus-pound super soldier. So, with all that bravery, what did he fear? I sat there by myself, confused. Pepper Potts' rescue. In the Avengers Tower, in her personal office, Pepper Potts was staring at a news report on a flat-screen TV situated on a wall near her desk in shock. The woman on the screen with blonde hair and a fake smile Pepper recognized was on Witcher World News, talking about someone new in New York City. The issue was that Pepper Potts was very familiar with the person they were discussing. With all the news on the Avengers and their new recruits, it seems the newly named Bridge has forgotten to introduce us to a new face on the scene, the woman said with that perky fake smile. Beside her, a graphic appeared showing a being in purple armor. Seen alongside Dial and Iron Man as they go on patrol, the new armored hero, one could practically hear the quote marks, has been making a name on the scene, given the name Rescue based on conversations overheard by those who have encountered her. She has gained a mixed reputation among those who have seen her. Footage played of Pepper, Tony, and Mahmoud, the first two in their suits and the last in his astrodactyl form. Flying through the city they all called home. Jarvis, Pepper asked, how many stations are running this story? Not many, ma'am. Due to the anonymous nature of your flights, more focus has been put into reports on Bridge and the Avengers in recent days. But people have noticed. There has been speculation, the woman on the screen said, that this woman is one of Tony Stark's recent paramours. Someone he has chosen to bring with him on his patrols, though the reason for Mr. Stark bringing her on patrols can only be speculated on. Pepper narrowed her eyes at the very obvious insinuation. This speculation is due to Rescue's actions, or rather her lack of actions. Despite joining Dial and Iron Man on patrols, she has never been seen engaging in any heroic activities. An older man wearing a black shirt with red hair appeared. Yeah, I've seen her a few times, but she only ever flies around, doesn't do much else. She might be new, just scared of fighting. I think she's spoiled or something, an Indian woman wearing a sundress said with a frown. She just follows them around and doesn't do anything. I've seen other heroes fighting on Instagram and stuff, but no one ever mentions her. This is why women should not be superheroes. A young man with shaved hair yelled angrily. She just can't handle it. I mean, have you even seen Black Widow fight? No. She just lets the real heroes do her job for her while looking pretty. More people appeared with similar complaints, Pepper staring incomprehensibly at the screen, trying to understand what was happening. Selfish. Cowardly. Granted, she was going to dismiss the last with ease as baseless. Seriously, there were dozens of hours of footage of Natasha fighting nowadays, but all this hatred was so odd to her, even accounting for this possibly being biased reporting. She just liked flying. She felt closer to Tony while doing it, and it was so wonderful. Flying through the air, diving through the streets, floating among clouds. She wouldn't trade that experience for anything. Did people really believe that having a flying suit of armor automatically made her obligated to start risking her life? That was like saying anyone who bought a helicopter should join search and rescue or something. Pepper leaned back in her seat to listen. Frowning, the new report switched back to the blonde woman. With speculation on who this armored figure is, one can only wonder what she is thinking behind that faceless mask. One thing for sure, Tony Stark likely has something to explain Virginia Pepper Potts, his current girlfriend, about the new woman in his life. The smile on the blonde woman's face became genuine, though that didn't make it nice. I'm Christine Everhart, and as always, thanks for watching Newsfront. The TV was shut off. Pepper, holding the remote, stared at the screen. People were calling her a coward, and Christine Everhart, a woman she hadn't seen in years, was more willing to believe that Tony was cheating on her, rather that she was the woman in armor. Pepper rested a hand to her cheek, thinking silently to herself. She wasn't a fighter, not like Tony. She still had nightmares of when she'd killed Killian. Tony was insistent on the pun when talking about that. She'd rarely even fired her armor's repulsors, mostly doing it as a test. She just wasn't the type of person to get into that sort of thing. By all accounts, she shouldn't have cared about what Christine Everhart of all people was saying about her, let alone what others were saying. Except that similar thoughts had filled her at times, watching Mob Maud and Tony take out muggers, thieves, mobsters, even a would-be rapist once. She'd felt a certain disquiet as she floated in the background watching them save people, help men, women and children of New York firsthand. She'd never understood what it meant to be a superhero, no really, until she saw them saving people firsthand. She loved Tony, and on some level she understood why he did what he did. But most superhero fights she'd seen before that had seemed more like a bigger and louder version of schoolyard fights than anything. Every person to personally come after Tony had an issue with Tony in particular. She'd never really seen Tony simply go out and save people for the sake of saving them. Not on a consistent basis anyway. It was eye-opening, seeing him in action like that. And now, Pepper didn't know what to think. She wasn't someone to beat up people no matter how bad they were. Should she even be thinking about this? Why was she so affected by it? Memories came to her of Tony battling monsters while she watched from the sidelines. The thought consumed her even as she went back to work. Sky. You want to upgrade my armor? Sky asked, confused. She, Fitz, and Simmons were standing together in a lab around a suit of Iron Man armor, or Iron Woman in this case. Yes, Fitz said excitedly. The Avengers and most of the bridge personnel had said their goodbyes already, taking off to prepare for their next operation, leaving Coulson's team a small group of bridge elites to defend Audrey, Tony, and Mahmoud. We think we can add the melter tech to your armor, Fitz said with a grin. When Horgan made his armor, the power source was able to create heat rays of incredible power thanks to his improvements. If we modify it further, we can develop a way for armor and weapons to withstand immense cold. Like what? Fitz faltered for a moment. Like what Donnie can do. Skye looked at him. Simmons stepped forward and put a hand to his arm. Fitz, Donnie isn't your fault. Yeah, I know, Fitz took a deep shuddering breath, just tired of my friends being in Hydra, willing or otherwise. Skye didn't say anything to that. She was able to acknowledge that she wasn't on the same page as Fitz when it came to one of their friends being in Hydra. So, the armor? How long would it take to do that? Fitz looked up at Skye and swallowed. A couple of hours, maybe. Tony is doing the same with his armor. We just wanted to do the same to yours in case you ended up being needed. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, Skye agreed. She thought, for a moment, about Mahmoud and his constant insistence on her being safe. She shook her head, dismissing him from her mind with some difficulty. Well, go ahead and do it if you want. Yes, Fitz cheered loudly, startling both women. Oh, sorry. It's just Jury Rig's technology is so fascinating. I'll get started. With a vibrant energy to him, Fitz ran out of the room. Tony, she said yes. Awesome, Tony's voice said from the distance. Simmons and Skye shared a look before the two of them started giggling at that. It is exciting though, isn't it? Simmons said, still giggling. All the new technology and people we're dealing with, working with the Avengers. Yeah, if anyone had told me I'd be doing this before I met Coulson, Skye trailed off with a smile. Things have been pretty crazy around here, though. Excuse me? The two of them turned to see a new face enter. Well, two faces. One was Audrey. She was looking at them nervously as she walked into the bus's lab. Behind her was someone Skye and Simmons had only seen during the briefing. One of the bridge elites. Frank something. He'd been assigned to watch over Audrey for the duration of the mission, as apparently Steve liked the man. To his credit, Frank followed the order with incredible enthusiasm once Steve had given him the order. Skye had to hold back a smile for a second. Steve, she was on a first-name basis with superheroes, and even Dial was. She cut that thought off. I was wondering if Phil was around, Audrey asked. She frowned for a moment. We have to talk. Well, he might be with Tony on the Defiant, Simmons supplied with a gentle smile. Defiant? Audrey asked, confused. It's an experimental Quinjet, Skye said. Granted, the Defiant was more like a fully functioning starfighter, but that was a complicated thing to explain. She looked at the guy behind Audrey. Yeah, I've got it. The guy met eyes with her. Skye winced. Damn, this guy was intense. She thought Ward was good at eyeing people, but this guy was something else. It was like his eyes only had one setting for everything. Maximum glare. Maybe he smiled with his friends or something, but Skye found that hard to believe. She looked away very quickly. The guy turned back to Audrey. Ms. Nathan. Thank you, Frank, Audrey said with a smile that the guy returned. The two left, leaving Skye and Simmons alone again. I guess all we can do now is wait, right? Skye asked Simmons. Yes, I suppose so, Simmons said with a sigh. It's a bit nerve-wracking, to be honest. I'd rather they simply attacked and got it over with. Hanya! Harkow! An explosion in the distance startled both women, who looked at each other. Okay, you asked for that, Skye said numbly. I should have remembered Murphy's Law, Simmons agreed, sounding disappointed in herself. Like Hermione failing a test as opposed to someone who had tempted fate. Mahmoud Shahed Dial. I was still messing with my watch when that explosion sound came from the distance. Thankfully, my instincts had been getting a workout, so I was already up and moving before I realized. I ran to the cargo bay and ran down the stairs, looking at the Omnitrix briefly before tapping my chest instead. My armor grew over my form, wrapping me in its comforting weight. At the bottom of the stairs, Skye and Simmons were running out of the lab to head out as well. Skye gave me a worried glance. "Where did that come from?" "Jarvis X," I asked. "Northern Airfield," Jarvis answered. "A cargo plane similar in design to the busts was destroyed." "Wait, only similar?" I ran out to see the Defiant nearby. Tony getting into his Dark Force armor with Fitz, Audrey, and Frank standing next to him. Frank's own armor snapped into place around him as I ran to join them. Phil came out of the Defiant. "It's him," Phil said simply. "But there are no Hydra in the area. Bridge Intelligence apparently just found out about 3 destroyed Quinjets that were discovered with a whole lot of frozen and lifeless bodies around them near the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum, Donnie and Daniel's signatures. We don't know if they're Hydra yet, but it's a good bet." "That place with Howard Hughes' plane?" I asked, as Skye and Simmons joined us as well. "Why would Daniels and Donnie kill the people helping them?" "Because they were going to stop," Frank Castle said thoughtfully. We all stopped to listen to him. "Hydra knows the Avengers are here, and they've been focused on using guerrilla tactics to keep us from hammering them. They'd retreat." "Hell, I'd retreat too. If Daniels is obsessed as we thought," he glanced at Audrey, who was looking around at us scared. "He must have had a problem with that. Killed them and ran here half-cocked. Explains why that cargo plane was destroyed. The idiot didn't know anything about his target and attacked the first thing that might be it. This is basically a self-driven rampage." The irony of Frank Castle commenting on self-driven rampages.
"Oh, we can use that."
"Saves us the trouble of tracking him and Donnie down at least," Phil said firmly as May came over. "May, take Audrey and the rest to the helicarrier on the bus. Dial, Tony, you two will engage them. Punisher, choose a team." "I'm staying," Skye said. I opened my mouth, then closed it, choosing not to say anything. "Okay," Phil said calmly. "Tony, did you manage to—" "The melter upgrade is in," Tony said, his faceplate snapping down. "Let's do this." I looked down at the Omnitrix. I hadn't been able to unlock anything new, so I'd probably stick with Swangfire to counter Donnie and feedback for Daniels, though granted I had no idea if feedback's power would work on negative energy. How the hell could energy even be negative? "Okay, let's go. Look." Tony stepped towards me. "Clench up, kid," he said while grabbing me under my arms. He took off into the sky while carrying me, heading for the explosion. Flying over a hangar, I activated my thermal vision. I immediately saw the cargo plane that was burning in the distance, walking towards us across the land that separated one runway from another, causing the green grass to wither away and die or freeze solid, were 2 figures that seemed to absorb the world around them. They weren't even a cold blue. They were more like dark spots in my vision, shaped like people. "Down there," I said, letting the comms send my words to him directly rather than trying to yell over the wind. "Dropping you down there," Tony confirmed. He shot over the tarmac and let me go. I dropped down and activated my jump jets, landing on the ground in front of the 2. Tony slammed into the tarmac next to me in a classic 3-point landing position. We stood side by side moments later. Daniels and Donnie eyed us and stopped about 20 feet away. "Any chance we can convince you guys to give up? Rather not scratch up the suit?" Tony asked, his voice hard despite the joke. Blackout smirked, the tall man shaking his head. "You're keeping her from me. Nothing you say will change my mind. I will save Audrey." "Save the woman you're stalking," I mused. "Yeah, you're way off the reservation." A black beam slammed into my chest, sending me flying. I grunted at the impact, eyes wide at the feeling of spinning through the air. Sheriff. I landed on the ground and rolled for several feet before coming to a stop. "I'm in love with her," Daniels yelled in the distance. "Not stalking her. The 2 aren't mutually exclusive, you asshole," I said under my breath. I rolled to rise only to blink when I felt a strange sensation from my arm. When I looked at the Omnitrix, it was flashing green. Later, I'd wonder how. Did Daniels somehow activate it? Was it me messing with it? Did Dark Force blasts have some sort of interaction with the Omnitrix that I couldn't have predicted? Or had I simply bumped into it in the right way during my roll? Whatever the reason was, I began to transform in a flash of green light. I rose up in height by at least 3 feet. My skin changed texture, becoming more rough, like brown cloth. It also began to split at points as my muscles and bone faded, leaving nothing but the cloth-like material. A green glow came from between the gaps. My head grew a large helmet-like structure, like that an ancient pharaoh would have worn, while a kilt-like garment similar to an Egyptian shendet came across my waist. I stood tall and stared out with glowing green eyes. Snero. Transformed. I looked down at myself and grunted, my voice sounding almost like I'd been filtered by a ghost voice app. Snero, instead of Big Chill or Heat Blast, against an ice villain. Well, guess this had to happen at least once. Daniels and Donnie stared at me in shock. Well, Daniels did. Donnie blasted at me with ice. I dodged around it by turning into scraps of bandages and floating through the air to dive around the cold attack, moving forward to reform in front of him. I extended my arms forward and turned them into dozens of reaching tendrils, wrapping Donnie in my bandages, only for him to freeze my appendages near instantly and break out from the now super brittle cloth. Another ice attack froze my chest from neck to navel. I released my chest and let it fall to the ground as I grew another one. "I've got Donnie!" I yelled at Iron Man. "You get Loverboy." "On it," Tony yelled, speeding forward in his black and gold armor to shoot at Daniels with bright white light. "I'll kill you," Daniels snarled, a black burst of power leaving his hands to fly at Tony, who spun away from the attack to blast Daniels. Daniels, apparently having learned to respect Tony's attack earlier, ducked down and began to run, Tony and Daniels trading shots at high speed as pure shadow seemed to seep out of the latter. "I'll try not to hurt you," I told Donnie, shifting forms to duck under another beam of cold. He stomped on the ground, releasing a blast wave of cold around him. I blocked it by shapeshifting my right arm into a shield. The arm froze and shattered. I grunted. "Well, not too much at least. Can't have you hurting me either." I ran towards him, turning into scraps of cloth-like flesh to fly in the air. With experience from Goop and Upgrade, I was able to adjust quickly to Snero's brand of shapeshifting. It was different in a lot of ways, being a giant bandage monster. I felt so strange, like I wasn't alive anymore, which kind of made sense, but it was as though my body was filled with some undercurrent of energy, something I'd only felt once when I'd become Frankenstrike. Combined with the whole bandage thing, I was feeling some weird combination of powerful and inhuman as I flowed through the air as simple bandages and reformed as a giant mummy with glowing green eyes. I punched at Donnie, but he surprised me. He raised his hands, and the air in front of him was suddenly made of ice, the frozen shield protecting him from my punch. When I pulled back my knuckles, they were chipped and frosted. I ignored that in favor of punching again, shattering the shields and my knuckles and sending Donnie backward. He rolled clumsily to his feet and hit me with more cold frost. Getting my legs, I got rid of those and floated to reform next to him, coming down with a double hammer blow that was blocked by another bunch of ice as he rolled away. "Kid, just let me help you," I yelled in my ghost voice. "Just, A blast of ice to my head shut me up. Then he formed a sword made of ice and chopped my arms off. Seriously, Donnie was not that powerful in his files. Curse inaccurate paperwork. I reformed in an instant and glowered at him. Looked like the fight was more even than I was expecting. Fine, let's get serious. I slid across the ground as dozens of strips of mummy wraps, moving towards Donnie like he was Indiana Jones and I was a bunch of snakes. Unlike the good Dr. Jones, Donnie was unfazed and started blasting wide waves of frost at me. I slithered around them, leaving portions of me to fall and shatter on the ground before going in between his legs and rising up into an uppercut as I returned to my bipedal form. Before my large bandage fist could hit his chin, Donnie created a hasty chunk of ice, which, though it shattered under my strength, kept me from making a knockout blow. I twisted out of the way of another blast by turning into scraps on the wind, wrapping a tendril around Donnie's arm and twisting to throw him. The tendril froze in an instant, shattering into white shards, but I still managed to toss him across the tarmac. Donnie, in a move of athleticism I didn't expect, managed to twist in the air and shot ice to form into a slide connected to the ground large enough to support him. He went onto it at an angle, sliding across the ice to turn a throw into a safer stumble, before turning and blasting at me again. "This is getting annoying," I said in my odd ghostly voice, ignoring my arm getting frozen and shattered again. Well, not ignored. While I still had plenty of energy, I could feel that the constant shape-shifting and regeneration would take its toll eventually. Not to mention, if he managed to freeze my entire body, I would be effectively taken out of the fight. Johnny couldn't kill me, but he was also good enough that I was starting to get worried. "Tony, any chance you can help?" Not really. Far away, I could hear the whine of repulsor beams and the strange muted sound of Dark Force attacks. This guy isn't getting through my defenses, but I can't seem to overload him. What was Hydra doing to this guy? "Then we need to find some other way to stop them," I said, creating a large shield of bandages out of my left arm to block another ice attack. The shield froze over, but my strength let me hold it up to keep blocking the attacks. "Your armor is upgraded with melter tech, right?" "Probably," Tony said hesitantly. "We didn't get to test it." "Jarvis?" "Logic dictates testing before attempting a live fire exercise." Jarvis sounded very beleaguered. "But I don't see any issues arising." "Then I say we trade dance partners," I said over the comms, dropping the shield and moving to attack Donnie again. The ice user snapped his hands out and made a pair of icy blades. He grabbed onto the hilts and walked forward with that damned emotionless look on his face. It was terrifying, on some level. Creel hadn't been so far gone that he had no emotions at all. What had Hydra done? "You come towards me and I'll go for you." "Sure thing, fanboy." With that, I split myself in half to avoid a slice from Donnie. As the sword passed in between me, I floated away before flying away. Donnie, single-minded as ever, chased after me, running with the endurance of a skilled athlete. He tossed aside his swords in favor of shooting at me. His ice attacks came in the form of clouded mist, focused blue glowing beams, or white-hot lightning-like attacks, none of which he was supposed to be capable of. In fact, did the effect seem to be getting stronger the closer he got to Daniels. I discarded that thought as the black and gold for of Iron Man flew towards me, Marcus Daniels chasing after him. As I passed Tony, I formed a hand to slap at his "Tag out," I said, rushing towards Marcus. Seemingly realizing what was happening, Daniels fired a shadowy cloud at me. I ducked around it. Behind me, Donnie attacked Tony with an ice-cold attack. Tony held his arms out to take the attack on his chest. For a moment, frost formed across Tony's armor. Then it shattered away in a blast wave of heat. "How about that?" Tony said, sounding amused. Donnie raised his hands and sent out waves of ice. Tony raised his own hands and unleashed heat rays that smashed into the cold, sending out steam in all directions. As they began to battle, I was floating towards Daniels. The steam sent off from Tony and Donnie threw me off my trajectory, however, sending me in a different direction. Daniels managed to blast me in the air, tearing through my bandages. I regenerated them and flew towards him again. He grinned at that, and to my surprise, didn't move at all, as I came in close and reformed to attack him with a fist. Once I was in my full form, however, Daniels stepped forward and grabbed my arm. For just a moment, we stared at each other, Daniels smiling. "Are you trying to absorb my energy?" He paled, apparently realizing something Donnie was too out of it to figure out, that I was an 8-foot-tall mummy who could regenerate from damage and no-sell his best one-hit kill move. I punched him in the face as a reward. Rude, had I been saying that a lot lately? I ignored the thought in favor of wrapping Daniels in my tendrils as he staggered back with a broken nose. Behind me, Tony and Donnie were still battling it out. I ignored them, focusing on Daniels as I wrapped him up in more and more tendrils. He exploded with dark energy, tearing at the bandages surrounding him as he screamed, "You won't keep me from him, Merv." I pulled a Spider-Man and wrapped a bandage around his mouth. If I wanted to listen to creepy assholes, I'd make a Tinder with Natasha as my profile pic, I quipped. "Good one," Tony yelled overhead. "Thank you," I ducked around a dark force attack as a ball of cloth. In that form, I rolled around the tarmac at high speed, dodging blasts. Good thing I've played so many video games, I mused, bouncing off the floor to slam into Daniel's chest, sending him flying with a shout. Samus and Sonic, eat your heart out. Fanboy, Tony yelled at me. Playboy, I yelled back, rising to my mummy form. Stop acting like I'm a joke, Daniel spat out, rising up. I focused on him, surprised at the view of his eyes. They had gone black. I'm going to kill you. Shadows lengthened. He stepped forward. I'll kill you all. He fired a shadow the size of a truck at me. I turned into strips of cloth laying on the floor, watching as they passed over me. You're all going to die. Daniel's skin started to flake away. Black something showing up underneath.
Okay, gonna have to end this.
Dark force.
Okay, I got an idea. It was risky. I didn't know how much time I had, but whatever was happening to Daniels, we had to finish it.
Tony, come over here. I tapped the Omnitrix. Snare roll was awesome, but it was time to go next level. Tony flew towards me as I flashed green. Upgrade. I was only in my normal upgrade for a moment when Tony flew into me. I joined to his armor instantly, sinking into it. As I joined with his armor, portions of me went deeper, in the implants with Tony that let him remotely control his armor. We flew spun in the air to face our opponents, the arc reactor in our chest glowing with immense green power. We are Venom, I said jokingly, in as deep a voice as I could say it in. Joining with Tony was different from joining with Rhodey. Rhodey's armor, advanced as it was, wasn't as worked over with as Tony's was. Rhodey went for tech that worked, not the experimental. It was like the difference between a person who painted houses and a person who painted art, similar but with different focuses. Not much time to do this. I flowed into the weapons Tony had made within the armor to combat Daniels. Donnie was running towards us, but he was still far enough away for us to finish this. Daniels aimed his hands at us, roaring as he launched Dark Force at us. We responded to the incoming waves of energy by lifting our hands up. Ports on our shoulders opened, large cannons flowing out to aim. Our arms became giant cannons, and the arc reactor on our chest changed its light's color from green to white. We fired 5 bright lasers of white light, 2 from the shoulders, 2 from the arm cannons, and 1 from the chest at the Dark Force cloud. The 2 massive forces, light and darkness, met in the middle with incredible force. I'm increasing our power as high as I can, I told Tony, Upgrade's voice being a bit more natural sounding than Snare's. Go further, Tony shouted, his muscles straining. Donnie's almost here. We need to take out Daniels before that. I'm on it. I flowed into the power conduits and improved them further. For the first time, I was straining as Upgrade. I could read the scans on Tony's HUD, and Daniels was somehow getting to a level of power we hadn't anticipated before. I'd never been familiar with the character of Blackout before, but if he'd been that powerful, he would have probably shown up more often. The concrete beneath Daniels's feet began to crack, shadows pouring up to meld to him. His eyes crackled with black energy. The air before him was gone, replaced with his Dark Force power. In retaliation, Tony roared, "Peace out, boogeyman." I completed the power conduits. As Tony leaned into his assault, the 5 beams of light intensified in power, slicing through the Dark Force. Daniels roared, the last of his skin flaking away before the waves of power hit him. For just a moment he seemed to flicker. I poked my head out of Tony to fire my own blast of white light. With that final blow, Daniels exploded. The Omnitrix timed right then. I separated from Tony in my fully armored form and fell to the ground, exhausted. I looked towards Tony, who floated above me, breathing heavily. A beam of ice hit Tony, blasting him out of the air. I spun around and raised my arm, atoms flowing into a shield. Donnie hit me them. I screamed as cold flowed through the shield and armor, my HUD screaming at me as the sheer blast of ice seemed to suck the air from my lungs. Holy shit, Donnie. You killed him. Donnie apparently lost whatever emotionless demeanor he'd had, replacing it with a lost sort of scream. You're welcome, I shouted back. For all my brevity, I was in trouble. Donnie had been powerful before, but now he was something else. The world around me had become a snowstorm, my HUD sending me alarms as the environmental control system struggled to compensate from the sudden drop in temperature, and my skin started to stick to my armor. "Tony, I've got you." Tony slammed into the ground next to me in a burst of fire. I screamed at the intense pain of cold giving way to heat. Stumbling, Tony came close to me. "This is insane," he yelled over the rushing wind. Snowflakes fell from the sky as the tarmac frosted over. "He's created a blizzard. We need to stop him," I yelled. Another crack made me scream in pain as a wing of a plane slammed into me. I landed on the ground. Tony seemed to falter as he flew over to help him. "I'll do it." "Tony, we have no choice," Tony yelled. "I'll try to knock him out, but he's becoming too powerful." Sudden streaks of black were floating in the snow, disappearing and reappearing. Tony flew into the icy winds, leaving me to stagger after him. The world was a white haze. I felt hail begin to fall from the sky, shattering against my armor with bone-crushing force. The atoms within my suit fought to protect me. I slipped on a patch of ice and barely kept from falling. Fuck! I never remembered Blizzard being this powerful in the comics. This was on the level of Iceman or Storm. "Donnie, stop!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. "We can help you. We can cure you." Ice shattered across my arm as more warnings flashed red on my HUD. I felt desperate at this point. I may have been joking around, but Donnie was a victim. Someone we wanted to save. Someone I didn't want to see die, for Fitz and Simmons at least. We had to help him. "Donnie, please. Fitz misses you." Then I was in the eye of the storm. Tony and Donnie stood there. Tony in front of me and Donnie across from us. The kid was yelling wordlessly with his hands forward, launching waves of blue-white frost at us. Tony poured on bright orange waves of fire. "He's not listening," Tony said desperately. "Donnie!" I yelled over the sound of waves of steam and the blizzard around us. "Come on, man, we can help." Then a pillar of ice shot up nearby. I stared at it, only for another to shoot up underneath me. I flew into the air and activated my jump jets before I landed, slipping slightly on the ice. More and more pillars began to rise, but I was focused on Donnie. He looked at me and pointed a hand at me. In slow motion, I saw Tony look at me as well. The Iron Man seemed to hesitate. He knew, like me, that Donnie was about to shoot at me. With this new level of power, what would the kid do? More streaks of shadow flickered across Donnie's skin as Tony came to a decision. He activated his chest repulsor and opened up with more power. The heat-based beams finally overcame their counterparts, slicing through to hit Donnie. As I watched in horror, Donnie screamed. The blizzard shook under some unseen wave of pressure. Then it all exploded. When my eyes opened later, I was on my back. The night sky was still snowing, but the clouds had started to fade. With some effort, I struggled to my feet and looked around. Shards of ice rested all over the tarmac. A couple of planes nearby had been destroyed, my shards of hail the size of cars. Tony was standing in the center of the conflict, looking down at the floor with his fists clenched, his black and gold armor glowing red from the heat it was giving off. He looked over his shoulder at me. Nothing could have survived that. Yeah, I walked up to him, a deep sadness filling me. Tony had saved my life, maybe even saved the entire West Coast from the storm. Donnie had been making according to the readings later, but it didn't feel good, knowing an innocent and broken young man was dead now. Two of the most powerful beings on Earth, and still... I turned around, focusing on the next step with a heavy feeling inside me. "Axe, bring the Defiant over. Have they gotten to Wydra yet?" "No, sir," X said as my Quinjet rose up in the distance. "Good. How's Phil and everyone else?" "They've begun to rendezvous with the others. I will inform them of what happened." The Defiant flew over to us as I looked back at Tony. He let out a sound I couldn't really understand, then walked over to me. We got into the ship and left. A chunk of ice shifted quietly on the ground. January 20. In the Defiant, Tony and I listened to the comms as we flew through the air. He'd removed his suit and was sitting in the co-pilot's seat next to me as I piloted us through the air to rendezvous with the others. Maria was speaking firmly over the radio. We go in hard and fast. Dial, you'll be confronting Wanda Maximoff and Melissa Gold. Bruce, Tony, and Dial will take on Abomination and any other gamma mutates the Omnitrix can't cure. Tony, did you complete? It's done, Tony confirmed. Good. Then you'll help Hulk. Cap, you and the rest of the Avengers will join our forces on the grounds and inside the castle. Centipede soldiers and Chitauri armor users have likely infested the place alongside normal soldiers. Remember, in the event of Strucker escaping, we go for contingency plan B. Understood. Dial. Yes, ma'am, I answered. By the way, we've caught up. Ahead of us was an Insight helicarrier, one of the normal ones. It was flying south with Quinjets around it like bees around a hive. The Defiant joined the convoy. I could see the bus parked on the helicarrier as we flew with the group. Good! Then launched the assault. Now, Maria said simply. A contingent of the first Quinjets peeled off, followed by regular jets taking off from the helicarrier. I twisted around and joined them, pushing the Defiant as hard as I could before turning to Tony. You okay? I asked hesitantly. No, Tony said curtly. But when am I ever? He got up and walked into the back of the Quinjet. We flew on in silence across the forested landscape for several miles. When we got close, Jarvis spoke. Several enemy Quinjets are moving to intercept us. Anti-aircraft emplacements are preparing to fire. Then the party is getting started early, Tony replied, already wearing everything except his helmet, which he carried under his arm. I can take out the Quinjets. Bruce can get the emplacements. You sure? I asked from the pilot's seat. Hydra forced me to fight and kill a kid. The door of the Quinjet opened up, Tony put on his helmet, and I could hear it sealing and linking up with rest of armor. I'm going to make them pay for that. Jarvis, send me the package. On its way, Mr. Stark, Tony nodded at the response. Then he blasted out of the back of the Quinjet in a roar of noise. I turned back to the Defiant's controls, thinking for a moment. Hydra, 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 causing us nothing but trouble. Donnie, Jennifer, Trip, Sharon, all their victims in the graveyard. I hesitated a moment longer before reaching for the control panel. I turned on the weapons systems and looked over the radar. 12 Quinjets flying towards us, too far away to be seen by human sensors. But the Defiant wasn't a human ship, not completely anymore. I moved the joystick and aimed my weapons at the head Quinjet, ignoring Iron Man flying towards it to focus. With a pull of the trigger, the head Quinjet was hit by a pair of lasers to the wings. Thankfully, lasers are both too fast to dodge and extremely accurate, being, light. The Quinjet plummeted out of the sky. I aimed my weapons at the next as one of the Quinjets, next to mine, dropped a massive green being to the forest below. I fired my lasers once more, taking out another Quinjet. Then Tony was shooting his repulsors, and the two groups of ships met in the air. I twisted the controls around and grit my teeth, trying to take out another Quinjet, but instead slicing the top off a tree when the laser missed. The Hulk's baritone roar could be heard, followed by an explosion amongst the forest below. Come on, I yelled, twisting the Defiant around to confront another Quinjet. The Hydra pilot fired bullets that bounced off my ship's shields, depleting them slightly. I shot the other plane in its underhanging miniguns, destroying the weapon. Before I could finish it off, a bridge Quinjet slid around and fired into it, destroying the Quinjet. A quick zoom and enhanced cliché later, and I could see Clint inside the Quinjet, waving at me. I waved back, then focused on the fight as more Hydra Quinjets headed for us. I checked a timer in the corner of my screen. Right on schedule, a bright pink light showed up in the distance. "Ax, you got my back, buddy?" I asked with a grin, letting go of the controls. The steering and weapons joystick moved on their own. Always, sir. I got up and ran to the back of the Quinjet, leaping out as the ship flew sped up to insane speeds, shooting over the castle as gun emplacements fired on the Defiant. I fell towards the castle at a fast clip in my armor, aiming for the eastern side of it. When two Chitauri armored soldiers flew up to meet me, I twisted until my feet were facing the incoming ground and pulled out my rifle, aiming at a soldier and firing a warning hail of bullets that the pair dodging, letting me zoom past them. Before I got to the ground, I ignited my jump jets, landing on the ground with a solid but not bone-breaking, bouncing slightly. Safe. I looked up at the people waiting for me. Dozens of centipede and Chitauri soldiers, all eyeing me. Okay, I grabbed the Omnitrix dial and twisted the face. Let's go. Orange fur grew across my face and body, striped with black. I grinned as fangs slid out of my mouth. Wrath. Let me tell you something, Hydra morons. Wrath has had a depressing day and has been waiting for today for weeks. So now I'm going to turn you all into my punchy. A Chitauri soldier shot me in the face. I stopped, turning to look at the guy. You. Wrath beats you down first. With that, I leaped towards the soldier as all the others began to fire on me. Seconds later, the poor guy was screaming as I used him like a bludgeon. Wrath, the perfect form to get out some anger in a truly cathartic way. Bruce but Bullock. Hulk. Hulk roared as he rushed through the trees, snapping branches off his body with no regard for them. Ahead of him was a large anti-aircraft gun emplacement pointed up at his friends, shooting at them. Hulk narrowed his eyes, ignoring all the puny Hydra shooting at him to focus in on the giant gun. There was a moment, with Hulk's green foot digging deep into the earth as he was moments from hitting the thing, where the whole forest stilled. Then the Hulk was smashing into the gun, steel bending and shattering everywhere into pieces of shrapnel, the Hydra soldier piloting the gun flying into the distance. "Ha," Bruce said in his mind, "that was impressive, and you didn't kill anyone." Hulk shook his head, only barely listening. The big green monster felt his rage rise. "Okay, next one," Bruce said calmly. "Come on, big guy. We need to take these things out so everyone else can be safe." Hulk struggled to think as he turned around and ran towards the next emplacement, tossing aside a Hydra soldier as he ran past, then tearing through a tree which exploded into chunks of wood all over the forest floor. Bullets bounced off Hulk, who furrowed his brow in thought. "Abomination." Bruce sent a wave of acknowledgement. "We'll take him when he shows up, Hulk." A tank rolled over a nearby hill, firing waves of energy at the Hulk. They barely slowed him down, despite their unusual weaponry. Hulk roared, twisting around and leaping towards the tank to lift it onto his shoulders, before jumping again to land next to the next emplacement, spinning around to smash the tank into it. "Blonsky!" Hulk roared in challenge. In the distance, another roar responded. Hulk spun around, nostrils flaring with rage. "Wait, Hulk," Bruce said quickly. "I know you want to fight him, but Blonsky's not important. Jennifer is the one we want to save, remember?" Metaphorical ice water poured over the Hulk. For a moment, he stared longingly towards where the roar had come from. Then he turned and ran for the next emplacement. And if he hit it with even more anger than before, it was because he was picturing a green face on the metal. Steve Rogers, Captain America. "Oh, look at him go," Clint said from the cockpit as he watched Hulk tear another emplacement to pieces. "Focus," Steve said, leaning over to gaze upon the castle beyond. While he was carrying his shield, the rest of his clothes was more casual, except for several pouches across his legs and a small backpack. "We've got a job to do." Clint nodded, spinning the Quinjet to fire upon a Hydra aircraft, only for a fighter jet to zoom past with a missile. Steve turned and walked into the back. "Jarvis and X are still going through the files," Steve said to those gathered in the back, Bridger Leitz, Natasha, and Bobby, his comms sending his words to the other soldiers in other Quinjets. "But they've been able to tell us that Hydra has enough Chitauri armored and centipede soldiers for a small army. They've also made gamma-enhanced soldiers, at least 2 of which are stable. Now our people on the inside are going to be engaging us in combat. That's necessary for the ruse to work. So those are Avengers-only targets. Everyone else is fair game." Steve closed his eyes, thinking for a moment. "We don't expect everything to go perfectly, but you all have one order above all others. Come back home alive. Understood?" With that statement, the door in the back opened. Steve moved towards it, tapping his chest. "Captain America." With that, Catums flowed across his body from the pouches on his legs and the pack on his back, moving over his body. They formed into metallic plates across his frame, forming into gauntlets and greaves, covering him in hundreds of pounds of metal and other materials. The armor was similar in design to Steve's old costume, with a star that glowed with white flames of power. His helmet's face was all in one smooth piece, like that of a knight. Steve moved over to Natasha and Bobby, who were in their armor already, Natasha in a black version of Bobby's costume, only with red highlights. "Still not sure about this armor," Steve admitted, looking down at himself. "I mean, I can move really easily in it, but I'm still bulletproof," Natasha quipped. Steve looked over at Bobby, who shrugged. Steve sighed, then leaped out of the Quinjet. "Did he have a parachute?" a bridge elite asked, shocked. Clint, laughing like a madman, jumped out, Bobby and Natasha following with whoops of joy. "What the hell did we sign up for?" the same elite asked. "Killing wannabe Nazis?" another responded. "Yeah, that's fair." Steve's jets activated moments from impact, allowing his superhuman legs to take the landing on the grassy field in front of the castle. As he did, Iron Man and War Machine flew overhead, shooting their weapons at the tanks taking to the field. Sam following later to dive into the dogfight between the Quinjets. Clint, Natasha, and Bobby glided into the castle itself by crashing into the upper windows. Hartley, the woman codenamed Warrior, landed next to Steve from another Quinjet, followed by Bucky and Creel. Together, the four of them rushed across the open field towards the castle. For most, the run would have been suicide. Not so much for the quartet. Chitauri armored soldiers flew overhead and aimed at the group, shooting purple energy blobs at them. Steve raised his shield and blocked them as Catoms flowed to Bucky and Hartley's arms to let them do the same with their own shields. Creel shapeshifted into his vibranium form and simply kept running, ignoring the shots landing on him. Centipede soldiers took to the field as well, rushing out of the castle to attack the group while tanks were torn apart by Tony and Rhodey in a medley of destruction. Steve, the fastest of the group, met the soldiers first, but Bucky was already shooting, taking out one of them in a hail of bullets. Krill, in the meantime, leaped into the air with his superhuman strength. As soon as his feet left the ground, he changed colors from the dark gray of refined vibranium to a color closer to a see-through blue. Aerogel, one of the lightest and strongest materials on Earth, had a weight of 0.160 milligrams. Propelled by Creel's incredible strength, the superhuman rocketed into a Chitauri soldier with a roar, pulling the surprised Hydra soldier into his grasp. In a flash, Creel turned into his immensely heavy osmium form and slammed into the ground with the soldier beneath him. Creel rolled on the ground and came alongside Hartley, switching back into his vibranium form and punching a centipede soldier. Hartley stabbed her sword into the man, circling Creel to attack another soldier. For a moment, Hartley and Creel were fighting as one, moving between each other in synergy. Hartley sliced off the arm of a centipede soldier, then ducked to let Creel punch the man in the face. Creel blocked a series of Chitauri energy beams before Hartley jumped off his back to slash into those men. They fought as though they'd known each other their entire lives. Steve and Bucky, on the other hand, put them to shame. The pair of WW2 veterans ran up some steps leading to the castle. 4 centipede soldiers rushed them. Steve and Bucky raised their shields. The doors to the castle exploded inwards moments later when a hail of fists, elbows, feet and shields sent the 4 centipede soldiers flying. Steve and Bucky followed after, rushing across the ground at high speed. Hartley and Creel ran in next. Steve blocked a hail of bullets on his shield, then threw his famously mighty shield, ignoring the centipede soldier rushing at his weak left side. The soldier reached for a knife and stabbed at Steve. Bucky caught the blade in his robotic hand, snapping the blade before shooting the soldier in the chest with his BCW. As he did, a sniper aimed a shot at the former Winter Soldier's back and fired. The round bounced off the returning shield of Captain America. Steve spun with his shield to uppercut into the chin of a Hydra operative, Bucky, killing the sniper with a well-placed round. "Holy shit," Creel mumbled, watching the pair fight with grace and efficiency he'd never seen before. "Damn," Hartley said, biting her lip under her helmet. "I want that." Steve almost stumbled on hearing that, Bucky grinning at his friend. Some things never changed. They got back to work. Above the super soldiers, 3 assassins ran through the top floors of the castle, the sound of gunshots filling the air. Prince T'Challa, the Black Panther. The kingdom of Wakanda was thought of as the third world, primitive, full of nothing but farmers, tribes, and cows. If only people knew better, though for centuries it was agreed by those who did know that it was best to keep the secret of Wakanda. Of course, that was the exact argument that was being held in the throne room of Wakanda. To step into the light, or to continue as they had, days ago such a conversation would have been out of the realms of possibility for any of the rulers of Wakanda's tribes. Today, all the tribe leaders had come. King T'Chaka sat at the center, dressed in simple black robes on his throne, the beautiful golden city behind them. The prince sat beside him on the left, in a carbon copy of his father's outfit. Queen Ramonda sat on his right, wearing a beautiful purple dress. From there, the tribal leaders sat in a circle on a platform of brown stone, each with their own chair. With the bright sunlight behind him, T'Chaka listened to the group argue. The River Tribe leader, an older man with a crisp purple business suit and a large purple lip plate in his bottom lip, was speaking now. The River Tribe has been pushing for Wakanda to provide more support to the world for several years, to give refuge, medical supplies, and rescue those in need. This may be the first step to Wakanda aiding the world. Or to destroying our way of life, Wagabi, the leader of the border tribe, and T'Challa's best friend, spoke with a serious look on his face. You bring in the refugees, let the people of other countries know what we have, and their problems become our problems. That's not the issue we'd be dealing with, Oyoke, the leader of the Dora Milaje, said calmly. Don't forget what this man Dial has said. Tony Stark, for all of his genius, has none of the advantages our scientists have. His technology is great, but vibranium and our better educated scientists, as well as Shuri recently, T'Challa felt a burst of pride for his bratty 14-year-old sister, have always let us overcome that, but Dial is giving them alien technology beyond anything we've seen before. They are now years ahead of us in many fields. If this continues, then Bridge will discover us whatever we decide. Only for as long as Dial lives, the leader of the mining tribe, an older woman with an ornate red dress, mentioned softly. Starker raised a hand, stopping any outburst that may follow that. That is not something I believe possible. I have seen the power of the Omnitrix, and the skill with which Shakad wields it with. He is constantly watched by an AI, whether he realizes it or not. He is surrounded by the Avengers and Bridge's soldiers. More importantly, the aliens he can transform into gives him versatility and power alike to match most armies. Our armies might overcome them. We have more advanced weaponry and soldiers than they do, but the amount of damage we would have to do to defeat and kill Dial would expose us no matter what. And, in truth, T'Chaka smiled. I think this may be to Wakanda's advantage. Dial has promised to trade. Can he truly make such promises? The River Tribe leader asked, his lip plate wobbling with each word. He is only a soldier. He is more than that, T'Challa said. All the Avengers are. In many ways, they are similar to the Black Panther's role in Wakanda. Spiritual leaders, not just warriors. He is, with the help of his watch, a skilled scientist capable of accelerating Bridge's technological development. He holds more influence in Bridge than I believe even he realizes. And there is something honest in him. T'Challa looked at his father. My king, can we tell them? Yes. T'Chaka pulled out a cat-like object from his robes. Dial, in an attempt to prove his willingness to help us, has provided this, the Panther's Trail, he called it. I had our scientists study it. They have confirmed it is what he says it is. T'Chaka tapped the top of the device. A hologram appeared, crystal clear and almost solid in appearance. An image of a familiar enemy to Wakanda appeared. He was laughing, sitting in a room. Klawa, Wakabi said, his eyes hard. Is this? It is up to date, my love, Oyoke said softly. Klawa turned to one of the men around him, speaking to the man. This gives us all we need to find him. He can never escape from us again. Can it be trusted? The leader of the merchant tribe, who had not spoken yet, finally raised her voice. She wore large gold earrings about the size of a fist in each ear and was watching the hologram with keen interest. It has been confirmed, T'Chaka said in his baritone voice. I propose that we hold off on the discussion of what to do about Dial's proposal until we deal with this. T'Challa will lead an assault on Klai, or Yoke Wakabi. The two of them looked up. Klai is in an isolated location near Johannesburg. Take some of your best troops. Do any here object to this being a capture mission? When no one responded, T'Chaka nodded. Very well, go there. Bring Klai so that justice might finally be enacted. Then, I suggest we invite this discussion to continue at another time. T'Challa stayed silent, but the young man was thinking at a furious rate. This would change everything. T'Challa had never considered that such a conversation would ever happen. Dial had done this. That unassuming young man with a ponytail and beard, since meeting him, T'Challa's dreams had been strange, almost as though Bast had been sending him messages. T'Challa was troubled and he needed to discover why. Mahmoud Shahid Dial, let me tell you something, random Hydra goons. I sliced a Chitauri energy weapon in half and roared. You need to learn one thing. Wrath doesn't lose. Technically true. Even Creel had only beaten me because the Omnitrix timed out. Thus far, Wrath had a flawless win record. And I wasn't going to end it now. Around 30 men surrounded me in the courtyard, all their eyes on me, and I was willing to absorb all the attention. I had no idea where my hosts were, but I was willing to wait. Let's go, I roared, rushing towards a Hydra soldier and punching him hard enough that he flew into another man, the two crashing into a stone bench. I jumped up into the air. Milky Way shockwave. I slammed my claw into cobblestone, a wave of power erupting outward to send the men and women around me flying. As one landed on the ground, I grabbed him by the ankle, leaping into the air where I started spinning as fast as I could. Ah! The guy I was spinning screamed as I spun around and around in midair. Then I let go to let him smash through a window of the castle at high speed. Dragon throw, I shouted, landing on the ground and rushing towards the next soldier, laughing. Yes, Ruff loves this. Bullets started hitting me, but I ignored them to kick a centipede soldier away. Then the plasma weapons started hitting me. My fur got a little scorched by those, but not enough for me to really notice. I instead grabbed a soldier and spun her around, rearing my foot back before kicking the girl in the ass. Serious butt kicking. But then I spun to slam my claw into the floor again, sending out a smaller shockwave. I reached out and grabbed a stone bench, ripping it out of the ground and throwing it at a group of soldiers, sending the combined group of centipede and regular Hydra soldiers to the ground. Then a soldier punched me in the face, turning my head to the left. I stood still as more plasma bolts singed my fur and, starting to sting a little from the constant barrage, I took the small pain and let it fuel me, pushing my aggression higher as I smiled. In a way, the pain was a pleasure, was a good way to stoke my anger. Then I looked at the guy who had punched me. So you want to play with Raph? The centipede soldiers tended to show no emotion. This guy managed something close to fear. Then I grabbed him by the arm and twisted it behind his back before rushing forward at full speed towards his friends. The guy screaming in my grip, Antarian armbar. We bashed into a group of soldiers, sending them flying. I roared in pride, raising my hands up. Wrath is here. Who wanted a piece of Wrath? Who has the stones? A wall of the castle shattered outward to reveal a hall behind it. Out of it stepped Kristen Nunn. Granted, she wasn't a huge celebrity or anything, but she did have a reputation as a bodybuilder. This version of her was bigger, wearing a tank top, backward baseball cap, and sweats on a woman who actually towered over Wrath. She gave me a smile that was somehow shy. I'll fight you. I grinned at that before turning around and grabbing a piece out of the stone wall behind me, turning to toss it at her. She watched as the stone section of wall flew towards her before lashing out and punching it, sending gravel everywhere. Leave, she yelled to the soldiers around her. Now, support the defense in the castle. The normal Hydra Chitauri armored soldiers and centipede soldiers ran for it, leaving me and her alone. I'm Miriam, by the way, the giant of a woman said. Miriam Pouncey. Wrath is Wrath, I said with a grin. Ready? Yep. The two of us rushed each other, meeting in the center of the courtyard in an explosion of sound. We wrapped hands around each other. Miriam grinned in my face, whatever shyness in her eyes fading in an instant. I flashed my fangs. "Let's go." I wrapped my arms around her head and twisted, tossing her into a stone table, shattering it with her form. Miriam rolled backward with the impact when I ran towards her, coming up into an uppercut that sent me flying up into the sky, slamming me into one of the towers of the castle. The large tower cracked on the impact of my body. Miriam landed on me as I rested against the castle tower. She punched me in the face harder than even the Hulk had, sending a tooth flying. I roared and twisted to grab her arm, spinning her into the tower and shattering it with her body. We both yelled aloud as we ripped into the castle, dropping through the roof and dropping past Captain America and Nomad, battling two green monstrosities, landing on a lower floor. Miriam grabbed me by the arm and spun to toss me through another wall. I ended up inside a large dining hall, complete with a throne at the head of the room. My large form shattered the wooden table, sending shards everywhere. I rolled to my feet and faced Miriam before punching her back, my claw scraping across her chest to tear at her tank top. She yelled at the blow, staggering back. My fur was still singed from the earlier plasma bolts, but the real damage I'd gotten was from Miriam. "You hit hard," I said with a bloody grin, rolling my shoulders. "Wrath likes fighting you grapplers." "Lucky there are two of us," a cute voice said behind me. I blinked. Then a wall of sound hit me like a truck, sending me catapulting through the castle, spinning through the rooms. I roared, shattering stone on my body until something grabbed me in midair. When I looked at myself, a red energy surrounded my chest. Then it pulled me in another direction, sending me through a sofa, a wall, and finally a chandelier, spinning me all the while. "Rag! Wrathies is going to throw up." My body hit the ground in a shower of chandelier crystals. I rolled to my feet and faced my opponents. As the three came into the large foyer we'd entered, Miriam Pouncey landed in a boom of sound. Behind her, Elizabeth Olsen's lookalike flew in on waves of red power, projected from her hands, wearing a red longcoat and corset, her long brown hair fluttering. The final woman looked like Stephanie Wright, a tiny pixie of a weightlifter with very short bleached blonde hair, and she wore a skin-tight lifter's outfit with a white bird image on the front. She floated above us on wings of pink, pound cakes, Scarlet Witch, and Songbird. They may not be known to the world as such yet, but the three before me had a lot of power to yield. As I rose, I came to a tough conclusion. I had to change forms. I didn't want to. Wrath was a prideful form, and in truth he could handle most any battle that came his way. But for this fight, Songbird's sonic attacks would damage his sensitive ears far too much, not to mention Scarlet Witch's long-range telekinesis and Miriam pounding on me all the while. I needed durability and long-range power. Plus, there was the plan to consider. With a heavy heart, I reached for the Omnitrix. "Wrath could have won, you know," I yelled out before touching the Omnitrix. "Next time." In a flash of green, orange fur gave way to green skin. Large Tesla coils popped up across my body. Lighting crashed from the ceiling. I stood tall, looking at the woman across from me as electricity flowed. "Frankenstrike!" I faced the three and smiled. "Let's do this." I released a blast of lightning. Songbird flew up and took a breath. A pink set of waves flew from her lips as she floated above, clashing with my attack. Electricity and pink sound met in the center of the foyer, tearing apart the floorboards. Scarlet Witch unleashed her own attack and missed. Her attack hit the floor, tearing it apart further and sending me into the basement, the three women following. As soon as I landed, I looked at them in time to catch a fist from Miriam. I staggered back across the stone floor before coming up with a lightning-enhanced uppercut to send her back into a wall behind her, smashing the wall apart. Scarlet Witch unleashed a blast of red energy as she dropped in after me. I countered with lightning, the two energies exploding on contact. Scarlet Witch landed on the ground and blocked another lightning bolt with a shield of red power. My right hand lifted to attack Songbird as the pixie-like woman floated down, forcing her to block as well. Miriam rose up and rushed me. I roared, Come on, we aren't done yet. My eyes alive with power, I unleashed more lightning in a dome around me, keeping Miriam from me. For a moment, then the superhuman narrowed her eyes and dove into the dome. "Ya, Aj," she screamed in pain as she was electrocuted. She ran in anyway, wrapping her hands around my waist and spinning to smash me into a wall, both of us crashing into another room. Steve Rogers, Captain America. Steve watched as Wrath and Miriam went crashing down from the ceiling, the pair roaring as they clawed and punched at each other. Miriam had large bruises and torn clothing, while Wrath's fur was singed, his mouth bleeding. They were also smiling. "I miss fighting in normal battlefields," Bucky noted next to him. Steve snorted. "When did we ever get the luxury of a normal fight, Buck?" The pair started running again, moving through the stone castle at a high pace. "Dial and the grapplers are doing their part. We've got the other job." Bucky didn't respond verbally. Instead, following his friend, the two traveled towards the back of the castle, moving speedily side by side. "Karpaka," one of the bridge soldiers sent to them. "We're below you. Got movement." Something big rushing toward us. "Be careful," Steve said. "We have no idea what Strucker is unleashing to cover his escape." "Yes, sir, gamma levels rising."
Enemy contact, code green.
Steve held back a curse. Ideally, this scenario would have happened while Dial wasn't otherwise engaged. But then, plans always broke down in the field when you came down to specifics. He reached for his belt, activating his X-ray vision on his HUD. Below, he could see a massive misshapen form running through the hallways towards a group of soldiers standing in front of it. With the incredible precision gifted to him, Steve tossed a disc at the floor directly over the figure's path. The disc attached and beeped rapidly 3 times before exploding downwards. Steve leaped in as the explosion happened. He caught a flash of a green chin and smashed his shield into it as he fell. The being he hit squealed in pain, staggering back. Steve rolled on the ground to disperse his landing and eyed the creature in front of him. He was about 7 feet tall, with a giant right arm, a cancerous growth on his stomach like a series of large tumors, and green skin. Portions of his skeletal structure were showing. Steve stared at the being before narrowing his eyes. The being glared at him and screamed, a horrific sound like an enraged child being tortured. "Go!" Steve yelled to the squad of 5 bridge soldiers behind him. "Stop Strucker from escaping in case Dale can't finish the plan." "Understood," the squad leader said before barking to his men. "Move it." The Gamma-Enhanced watched the group of soldiers turn into a side hallway and ran to intercept them. When Steve stepped into the creature's way, it punched outward with its large, misshapen right arm. Steve raised his shield, blocking the blow with a grunt, setting his feet and pushing the monster back. "Ugh!" Confused, the creature lashed out at Steve, who flipped over his attack before kicking the freak in the chest. As it reeled back, a repulsor blast hit the beast in the chest. Steve glanced up at the hole he'd dropped through. Bucky was standing on the floor above. He looked down at his BCW, set to the repulsor setting. "I can see why Tony likes those," Bucky mused. Then the Gamma-Enhanced monster screamed and grabbed a wall behind him, fingers crumbling the grey bricks. The stone wall crumpled under his grasp. Then it twisted and tossed the entire thing at Bucky. The soldier dived down into the floor below as the portion of wall destroyed the section of the floor he'd been standing on. As Bucky landed, he was forced to roll under an attack from the monster, rising to fire another repulsor blast at his face. The Gamma-Enhanced took the attack to the eyes and screeched in pain. "Jarvis, we got a profile," Steve yelled, wincing when the creature kicked Bucky in the chest. "Buck!" The former Winter Soldier was sent through a brick wall like he'd been shot out of a cannon. Steve wanted to run after him, but the monster leaped forward and brought his fists down on Steve, forcing the superhuman to block it with his shield. "One moment, sir," Jarvis sent. "Rurga," Steve yelled, his knees shaking under the blow. The behemoth pushed down on him, Steve carefully taking the immense strength of the creature. When the horror pulled up slightly, Steve ducked and rolled in between its legs, leaving the monster to smash the ground behind him. "His name is Jean Anton, a Hydra soldier since childhood. He volunteered for the Gamma experiment and has killed many innocent people for Hydra. Steve ran through the halls, thinking with the incredible speed afforded to his enhanced mind. This man John was a killer, a soldier. Ideally, they would capture him, but with Dio otherwise occupied, Steve felt a grim decision fill his mind. He took a corner and spun to raise his shield. When the Gamma Enhanced ran around the corner in a spray of destroyed stone and dust, Steve was standing at the ready. The Gamma Enhanced beast smashed into Steve's shield head-on, sending him flying. Steve held in a scream at the feel of his shoulder nearly dislocating, but managed to twist in the air to land on a wall. The Gamma Enhanced rushed him. Steve jumped forward off the wall, his jets blasting out as he raised his shield high. With a thunderous blow, Captain America's mighty shield hit a wall of misshapen muscle, some of the tumors on the creature's stomach exploding at the impact, pouring green blood across the castle's floor. Gruk, the creature gurgled, falling onto his back. He swiped weakly at Steve, but the Avenger quickly rolled away, raising his shield. Yarg! Steve stabbed down with the shield's edge, bashing it into his opponent's forehead with every bit of muscle in him. The brute's head was slammed down into concrete. Girat and the monster leaped to his feet and punched Steve in the chest, the super soldier gasping at the devastating impact as his HUD sent warnings. The creature lifted him up by the neck, only to get the edge of Cap's shield in his teeth. The creature stepped back, then a repulsor blast made him let go of Steve. Bucky stood on the other end of the hallway. His chest plate was cracked, but Catoms were flowing to repair those sections of armor. Bucky and Steve shared a glance while Cap was still dropping to the floor. Steve landed lightly, circled to the reeling creature's back, and hit the back of its right kneecap with his shield, forcing it to take a knee. Then he wrapped his arms around its neck, pulling hard to force it into position. Bucky unleashed hell, a constant powerful blast of repulsor energy hitting the creature's head. For a moment, only the monster, Steve, and Bucky's screams could be heard just under the sound of loud repulsor fire. Then the blast finally pierced through its head, hitting the wall behind it. Steve ducked around the dead man's body, panting in exhaustion. For a moment, the two super soldiers stared down at the headless body. Then, the reports began to pour in. Gamenhan, requesting taking out their own men. Blonsky. Steve and Bucky spun and ran. Hulk! Hulk! Hulk ran towards the castle, tearing through a large sequoia tree at high speed. It's time, Bruce said gently. Blonsky is fighting a squad dead ahead. We need to help them. Hulk huffed loudly in agreement, breaking through the tree line to run across the grassy field surrounding the castle. Hulk's legs propelled him upwards as though he'd been shot out of a cannon, sending his bulk towards the castle. At least we don't care about this building, Bruce noted with some grim humor. Moments later, they crashed into the castle, entering a large greenhouse where a squad of bridge soldiers were running as they retreated from Hydra Chatauri, armored personnel, and soldiers in more normal assault gear. The greenhouse smelled earthy and was filled with flowers, fruit trees and vegetables, all neatly arrayed beneath a large glass ceiling, a pond at the center. The fighting had destroyed much of the area, dirt spilled all over the floor, a small lemon tree turned to mulch with its fruit torn apart by the boots of those inside. Hulk looked around, his enraged eyes panning the room. Bridge soldiers dressed in normal black gear hadn't stopped fighting but did give Hulk room. The Hydra soldiers immediately fired on Hulk. Hulk ignored them. Instead, he roared, "Teh!" For a moment, the world was still. Then two loud crashes were followed by two beings landing in the greenhouse. Hydra and bridge soldiers seemed to share a glance. Soon, calls to retreat spread throughout the ranks. Hulk eyed the two before him. Blonsky, girl Blonsky. The woman next to Abomination scowled, her horrific features twisting. It's Rana, you fucking moron, or aberration. Hulk took in the insult, Bruce speaking within his mind. He's more talkative than the last time we met, Blonsky said with a sickening smile. Nice outfit, was his comment on Hulk's purple armor. Miss me? Where Jenny? Blonsky stepped forward, crushing the concrete beneath his clawed feet. How cute! Hulk misses his cousin. Well, don't worry. After I kill you, I'll use her as a punching bag. Keep her around. Kill him, Bruce said softly. A fist slammed into Blonsky's face with incredible speed. Abomination had enough time to be surprised before his jaw shattered. Ransky stepped back, spitting out teeth. Hulk stepped forward, punching him once more. Blonsky pushed him back, allowing Rana to step in between them with a leaping uppercut that sent Hulk back. Arrgh! Abomination spat out more teeth, scowling as he healed. He's stronger than I remember. Then give me the staff already, Rana responded. Nah. Blonsky reached behind his back and grabbed a long object enveloped in a canvas bag. Let's share. He snapped the object within in half, then took off the wrap, revealing the 2 metal sticks within. The section where he'd snapped it was red hot, and Nordic runes were written across it. Abomination passed Aberration 1/2, the 2 grasping the pieces. Their eyes widened. The world seemed to still. Then they screamed together. The staffs glowed with unearthly power. Abomination and Aberration's eyes went a bright yellow. Then they eyed Hulk. We might be in trouble, Bruce said with a wince. I call it sport, Hulk responded with some effort. Wait. Was that a referee? Hulk ignored his other half, cutting him off to jump into Abomination. The larger Gamma-enhanced batted him away with the tiny metal stick in his hand, sending him flying out of the greenhouse. Hulk landed in the field with a giant bruise in his chest that was quickly healing. Rana jumped out of the greenhouse and hit Hulk feet first, cratering the grassy field. Yach! Sounding more like her larger counterpart, Rana began to hit Hulk, pounding him into the ground with the stick in her hand and a large fist. Hulk snarled, struggling to rise, but she stomped a clawed foot into his face. Hulk's vision went white. Come on, Bruce roared. Moving as one, Hulk and Bruce spun around, putting Rana in an armbar before slamming her into the ground. Then Abomination tackled the Hulk, the pair rolling. Hulk rose up into a rough boxing stance under Bruce's guidance, and the 2 began to duke it out. Fists smashed into flesh, Abomination using the metal staff in his hands like a baton. The earth quaked beneath their blows, the field tearing apart. Hydra and bridge soldiers avoided the area as Rana joined in. Hulk found himself using as much jujitsu and strength as he had to fight off the 2. Their strength had skyrocketed, becoming even more powerful than 4 arms had been as they beat Hulk up. Rana leaping to punch him in the chin before Abomination folded him with a knee to the stomach. Bruce tried to figure out what the hell was going on. The staff was clearly the answer. Bruce didn't know what it was, beyond a half-remembered comment from Coulson about an Asgardian relic his team had found, but it had somehow multiplied Abomination and Aberration's strength. Feel that, Brucey. Abomination crowed as he grabbed Hulk's arm and flipped him onto his back. That's power. Real power. He punched Hulk in the face, sending teeth flying. I'll have to thank your friend Thor later. Maybe when I kill him. Hulk, Bruce shouted, feeling the pain Hulk was going through. Rana landed next to Blonsky. The 2 monsters began to pound their fists into Hulk, cratering the ground beneath him. Rag! Hulk lifted his feet and kicked upwards, each foot sending the 2 superhumans beating him flying. Hulk stood slowly, his right eye closed shut, and portions of his armor struggling to reform as he faced his opponents. Bruce, within the Hulk, was struggling. He thought this could work, tempering the Hulk's anger with logic, guiding him. But here and now he felt almost useless. His basic knowledge of martial arts couldn't match 2 soldiers trained to kill, and he didn't want to risk grabbing the staffs that were making the pair almost seem to glow. Holding back, Hulk whispered. Somehow, Bruce knew that was a message to him. Bruce, within the mind of the Hulk, tried to think of what... He was doing it again. He was trying to guide the Hulk, but he was doing it by holding him back, keeping his strength limited, just like Dial had said. Bruce suddenly knew what he had to do. He let go. He stopped repressing, stopped keeping the pain away. It wasn't easy. He wasn't even sure he'd done it right, if there was a right way to do such a thing. But he felt it at the same time Hulk did. The memories flooded. A man so giant in his past beating on his mother. Bruce, crying, tried to stop him, only to get a fist to the cheek for his problems. Hiding with Jenny as the man yelled and cursed. Seeing Ross dismiss him as weak, not fit for Betty, being bullied through high school for his intelligence, beaten just for enjoying something he was good at, getting chased across continents for something beyond his control. And then, as they jumped together, Hulk and Bruce thought of their hatred for one another, anger at how they'd ruined each other's lives, chained together, never able to have a normal life, never to be anything more than a weapon, a life the Avengers had freed them from, but one that had left scars. They weren't fixed, but if acknowledging a problem is the first step, Hulk began to grow in size in the air, gaining inches in height and pounds of muscle that his armor grew around. A green glow surrounded his skin. Abomination arrogantly punched at him. Hulk caught his fist and clenched down hard. "AAAG!" Abomination screamed in pain. Hulk shut him up with an uppercut that forced his mouth to close hard, breaking teeth. Rana, faster than Abomination, managed to dodge a right hook, her eyes wide as Hulk stopped growing, but his eyes glowed. Gamma radiation filled the area as the three monsters stood there. Rana, her anger stoked by the magic pouring into her, barely kept control of herself as she prepared to battle the Hulk once more. Abomination rose, spinning the staff in his hands, and Hulk cracked his knuckles in preparation. Tony Stark, Iron Man. Flying over the forest around the castle, Tony blew out the back of a Hydra Quinjet with a repulsor blast. As the door went spinning past him, Tony went into the Quinjet itself and came to a stop at the cockpit. "Hey fellas, I need to see your licenses." The pilot leaned over and fired at Tony with a pistol. The billionaire let the bullets bounce off the black finish of his armor. "I think this counts as resisting arrest," Tony noted. With that, he blasted the pilot and co-pilot, then flew out of the windows, leaving the Quinjet to fall fruitlessly to the ground below. Outside, the dogfighting was fierce. Quinjets on both sides were supplemented by jets on Bridges' side and Chitauri armored fighters' side on Hydra's side. In the forest below the dogfighting, Bridge Elite and regular soldiers were fighting Centipede and Hydra alike. As Tony flew, he saw one Elite, wearing a unique armor, colored all black with a white skull, push a Centipede against a tree before stabbing him in the head, then spinning to fire an efficient series of shots at another man, the skull wearing Bridge Elite, moving like death across the battlefield. Sam was diving through the trees as well. As the most agile flyer in both armies, he was flying back and forth between the sky, trees, and ground. Anywhere in need of aid would suddenly have Sam there, diving through the trees to appear with a well-placed repulsor shot or series of machine gun bullets, before he was suddenly moving through the trees to appear in the skies and do battle with the Chitauri armored soldiers. One of those soldiers attacked Tony then, careening through the air and firing purple energy bolts. Tony narrowed his eyes at the man, then twisted aside to dodge a bolt before blasting the man in the chest. "Damn knockoffs," Tony scowled, going in for another one. Rhodey was floating in the middle of Bridges' side of the battle, shooting his many guns at high speed. Tony started thinking of several improvements he could make for the War Machine suit, but held back the ideas to focus on Tony. "It's Phil." Tony twisted around. "Agent?" Strucker had the Berserker staff. He gave it to Blonsky and Phillips. Phil said hurriedly. Jarvis, without prompting, brought up the profile on the item. Profile, Berserker staff. An Asgardian weapon that enhances strength and durability fueled by the wielder's inner rage and hatred. Shit, Tony said quietly. An Asgardian weapon giving enhanced strength, fueled by rage and hatred, and into the hands of murderous Gamma-enhanced, the poster children of anger management. "Jarvis," Tony shouted. "I need Veronica." "Already sent," Jarvis returned. High in space, a satellite hung, empty, as a four-pronged weapon flew down towards the Earth. When his armor let out a loud beep, Tony looked down at himself. The Dark Force armor was in bad shape, Donnie and Daniels having done some serious damage. But it would have to do. But just in case, he sent a text to Sky. "Rhodey, I'm going to help Bruce. Clear a path." On it, in the distance, the black dot that was Rhodey unleashed a huge amount of missiles and bullets, sending Hydra vehicles and men scattering or dying. Tony dived into that hole in the line. As he did, a large object flew down from the heavens, flying along with him as it released an object to zoom ahead of him. Hulk slammed Abomination into the ground with Hulk's right hand around the other monster's neck. Blonsky blocked Hulk's left hand by grabbing it around the wrist and raised the staff in his hand, stabbing it into Hulk's chest. Hulk roared but kept squeezing, Blonsky pulling out the staff to stab again. Aberration flipped in the air to slam her feet into the Hulk's head, sending him stumbling away as the staff in his chest was ripped out by the impact. Hulk shook his head, eyes glowing slightly, stab wound already healing, and faced the monstrous duo. Before they could meet in combat once more, something dropped out of the sky, landing in front of Rana. It was an oddly shaped metal object. For a moment the three were confused. Then more dropped around her, unleashing electricity as they fell. Itty-ee-ya! Rana screamed as she was electrocuted, bucking back and forth. The spears dropped quickly, surrounding her. She tried to escape as lightning hit her, but the spears enclosed with metallic clanks, leaving her trapped and screaming in a metallic tent, loud booming noises coming from within it as she punched at the walls around her. A being dropped down next to the Hulk with a loud kaboom. When Abomination and Hulk looked over, Iron Man was sitting inside a massive mecha suit, enveloping Tony. A faceplate dropped over the Dark Force armor, covering him with the shifting catoms until the full armor surrounded the Dark Force suit. "Hey, Hulk," Tony said within the Hulkbuster. "Mind me helping out, buddy?"
Hulk grinned.
I was still fighting Scarlet Witch, Songbird and Poundcakes when the calls about the Gamma-enhanced Hydra soldiers began to come in. I looked over at Songbird, who had wrapped me up in pink chains that were somehow, despite all the ways physics said it should not be possible, made of sound, Scarlet Witch, who was lifting a desk with her mind, and Poundcakes, who I'd sent into a wall. Then I released a massive burst of lightning while flinging my hands outwards, breaking the chains around me. Scarlet Witch tossed the desk, and I punched it in the air, shattering it apart before blasting Scarlet Witch lightly, electrocuting her with as much power as a weak taser. She screamed in pain as Songbird blasted me back with a wall of sound, sending me through the wall of the castle and into a small study, emptied out of any books but still containing bookshelves. Marion rushed in and punched me in the face, sending me into a stone pillar. I snarled and punched her back before Scarlet Witch ran into the room and sent a burst of energy at me, tossing me back. I rolled as I hit the floor and threw my power into a chandelier above. The electromagnetic energy hit the metal light fixture, and I pulled it down, dropping it down towards Songbird as she floated above. Seeing what I was doing, she blocked it with a pink energy wall of keening sound. The chandelier broke apart in a clatter of crystals and metal. Still controlling the metal, I pulled it in to surround me, then fired off the shards in a low-powered shotgun blast aimed at the group. Scarlet Witch and Songbird unleashed their powers to block the attacks. Marion ignored the hail of small metal bits, rushing in and uppercutting me. I snarled at the impact, my damaged vocal cords making the sound more horrific, and focused the lightning in my body into the coils on my back. They came alight in a burst of green explosion of energy that hit Marion like a hammer, lifting her off the floor and tossing her back. I rushed after her, only for Melissa to step in my way. I expected a pink wall to block me. Instead, Melissa stepped under my arms, grabbed a hold of my waist and slammed me into a wall with a twist and a heave. Somehow I'd forgotten that along with being a user of sonic powers and Green Lantern-esque energy constructs, Melissa Gold was also a badass wrestler with super soldier-like enhancements. She followed up her surprise toss by blasting me point-blank in the chest. I was sent smashing through the wall and into the next room. I hit the wall opposite and landed on my feet to unleash a quick blast of power that was blocked by another wall of pink energy. I panned my eyes around. Okay. This was the room we'd been aiming for. With a shout, I unleashed my power in every direction, acting as though it had been unintentional. Scarlet Witch and Songbird did the same as we all unleashed hell. Bursts of green, pink, and scarlet filled the room, power tearing apart the stone as we clashed until a loud crack filled the air. We stopped, looking down at where the sound had come from. That's when the floor exploded and fell out from beneath us, sending us into the basement. I landed in a roll and looked around quickly. While Frankenstrike wasn't a genius, I still felt like my mind was somehow faster when I was him. A lot of my aliens felt like that. Wrath made me dumb and aggressive. Astrodactyl made me prefer flying. Snurros left me feeling like limbs were more like fingernails. Point was, Frankenstrike seemed to come to a realization faster than I did, as Marion Rose, Songbird, and Scarlet Witch floating down to join us. The room was large, shaped like a big pit, the sort of place you could imagine someone getting tortured in, or a monster being created in. In front of us, a projector was shooting an image onto the wall behind us. When I looked at the image in question, the face of Baron Wolfgang von Strucker looked down calmly at us. "I believe that it is time that we end this farce," he said. Baron Wolfgang von Strucker, the leader of Hydra, watched the screen in front of him, eyeing the monster before him. Finally, a clear image of the hero known as Dial. They'd worked to find one, but it had been tough with Bridges' AI and the Hercules app constantly on watch. The beast Dial had currently taken the form of, seemed to be some sort of parody of Frankenstein's monster, tall and misshapen, but also built of corded muscle, green electricity flowing from his body. "I believe you know who I am, Dial," Strucker said calmly, "and you've become quite a problem for me." "It's not like I'm the only one," Dial said, his voice sounding peculiar. "Don't," Strucker said when Marion attempted to speak. "I already know you have betrayed me. I planned in advance for it." The group narrowed their eyes at him. "If that's the case, you know why I haven't just attacked you with everything I have," Dial said. "Where are they?" Strucker smiled slowly. "Do you mean Agent Triplet and Carter? Or Ms. Walters? Possibly the hostages John Garrett took in?" The four people in the room glared at him, Marion walking over to him. "All of the above," Dial said. "Stop the monologue, because if the next words out of your mouth aren't—" "Helen and Pietro," Strucker cut him off. "I believe you would want to worry about them first." "What?" Scarlet Witch stepped forward, horror and rage in her eyes. "What have you done, you monster?" Strucker held back a smile. "That was all according to plan. If he played his cards right, then the quartet would not be a problem. As I understand it, the plan you had in mind was to pretend to fight until the right signal would send you to intercept the kidnapped victims. And this creature you've turned into, it has some intelligence or skill to interfere with the cryo units I'm transporting them in." Strucker took their silence as a yes. "If my timetable is accurate, then I believe Pietro and Helen are currently helping Garrett, and if he has taken my subtle suggestions in his new mental state, he sees them as useful." Pietro Maximoff Quicksilver. Pietro sprinted through a world of frozen moments. He ran through a kitchen past a Chitauri armored soldier firing upon a man made of steel, the plasma bolts doing nothing. Pietro grabbed a knife off a countertop and stabbed the Hydra soldier in the leg as he moved past, scowling as he did so. Stupid, 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 stupid. They'd known that Hydra was S.H.I.E.L.D., but he'd never thought of what that might mean. All this time, all their rage at Stark, and they never considered that they were working for the man who had been— Damn it. The speedster shook his head and moved on. Right now he had only one task: work with Garrett until either the AI found out where Cybertech was, or Garrett just lead Pietro and Helen there anyways. Covering our bases, Helen had called it. He ran through the halls of the castle and grabbed a box off the floor in a room where a woman with a sword was fighting a centipede soldier. He moved under the slow-moving, to him, blade that she was swinging, tripping the soldier with ease, then moved on with the box in his hands. This was all he could do for now. Soon he could fight these bastards, but for now he was left to do small pranks no one could track back to him. In another second, Pietro had appeared in a forest untouched by all the attacks where several Quinjets had been prepared. The area had been cleared out to allow the 7 vehicles to land, and dozens of men and women were putting equipment into the Quinjets. He tossed the box in his hands at a nearby man. "Here's whatever that was," Pietro said dismissively as the large box bounced off the man's chest, speeding towards a Quinjet in the center of the makeshift escape zone. Helen was carrying a large metal machine that had to weigh hundreds of pounds into the Quinjet as Deathlock and Garrett watched. Pietro stopped in front of the pair of cyborgs. "That's everything. Can we leave now?" Deathlock eyed Pietro suspiciously, but Garrett laughed. Leave it to a speedster to be impatient. Pietro held back a shudder at the look Garrett gave him. The young man had seen looks similar to the sick smile Garrett had given him on Sokovians who had been in war so long they seemed to just crack. They became obsessed. It didn't matter what those men and women became obsessed with, war, religion, death, or worse. Garrett, smiling there, seemed to go beyond that somehow. He had a higher purpose, the kind that Pietro had learned to distrust long ago. Don't worry, kid. Garrett put a hand on Pietro's shoulder. When Pietro tried to pull away, Garrett held him painfully tight. Deathlock circled around the pair. The future is coming, and I can see the words of creation. Everything will be clear after some growing pains. Pietro had a moment to hear Helen shout out as the Quinjet's back door closed behind her. Loud bangs came from inside moments later, even as gas could be seen pouring from the gaps in the doors, something getting pumped into the Quinjet. Deathlock, having moved into Pietro's blind spot, shot something into the speedster's chest. Just as Pietro spun, a small object, shaped like a circle, stabbed into his chest and lit up red. Pietro managed to kick Deathlock back, then the device activated. Pain. His heart, usually beating so quickly, was suddenly filled with needles slicing through his body. Pietro fell to his knees, eyes wide. Wide, what is this? Stopped your heart, Deathlock said with sad tones. Not for long, but enough for this. Deathlock stepped forward as Pietro looked up at him, holding a syringe. Pietro, seeing the syringe, tried to move, but only flopped down to the floor, gasping for breath. His chest tight with pain as he tried to scream in agony. Deathlock stabbed the syringe into the speedster's neck. Made to knock even a speedster out, Garrett said with a gleeful smile. The Quinjet was rocking for a moment longer before it stopped. The door opened later, white smoke pouring from the Quinjet to reveal Helen leaning against a wall, the blonde powerhouse knocked out. Kinda sad to do this, Garrett admitted, as the tranquilizer injected into Pietro began to knock him out. I wanted to bring your sister along, but Strucker told me I was only allowed to take 3 of you, Garrett smiled. But hey, you'll do. Mahmoud Shahead deal. Fuck, I cursed. Frankenstrike's voice coming out in that strange combination of undead and electric that was going to getting used to. So what? We stop Garrett and you get to escape? It does seem to be the situation, unless the good captain and his people manage to reach me, Strucker smiled. Do not worry, it will be worth your while, if you survive this next part. A loud series of beeps came from around the room then, red lights blinking. I only had a moment to leap for Songbird and Scarlet Witch. Wrapping my arms around them, I was surprised to meet Marion's eyes when she did it at the same time, our giant forms wrapping around the petite women. Songbird sang, pink barriers surrounding us, and Scarlet Witch waved her arms to surround us with red energy. The bombs exploded, and the entire castle around us blew apart, tons of stone falling down on us as fire, shock waves, and shrapnel hit us. Toroi, I shouted, sending out lightning in a barrier, trying to push back any metal. Heat licked across my skin and burned at my hair. Yoi, Marion! Songbird and Scarlet Witch yelled in unison. Dust filled the air. Boulders landed on the Songbird's shield, then shattered it as they kept dropping, landing on the shoulders of Marion and me, some bouncing off of my Tesla coils. We held each other with Songbird and Scarlet Witch between us, all 4 of us yelling at the top of our lungs as Songbird and Scarlet Witch kept creating shields even as they shattered. When the explosions were over, we were buried. I coughed up some dust, holding up the weight above me with Marion's help. Everyone okay? Why, yeah, Marion said with a cough. We need to save my brother, Wanda yelled in my freaking ear. I ignored that for a moment, instead focusing on setting my feet under me. We'll get him, Melissa said, rising to put her shoulders up against the stones. Guess we can stop pretending to be fighting. Wait, was I disappointed? Well, maybe a little. I'd really wanted to see how much I could do. Nice to meet you all. Let's go save the world. Marion, Melissa, and I pushed up on the stone above us, all 3 of us yelling loudly. Scarlet Witch, the only one without some sort of enhancements to her physical body, waved her hands and thrust them upwards. The stones above us shifted. Then they exploded off us in a flash of red and green. A boulder, falling to fill the space, was shattered by a pink sound wave from Melissa. We were exposed to the open air. Just in time, too. The Omnitrix flashed red 3 times before turning me into my human form, wearing a simple shirt and jeans, my weapons on my back and hip. I blinked up at the trio of women, who stared at me. "Oh, thank God," Melissa said. "You were kind of scary looking before." "Yeah, well, it's going to be a bit before I can transform." "Dial." My armor flowed over me at the sound of my codename. I pulled out my BCW, the weight of the rifle comforting me. "Jarvis, you have them." "I'm tracking a group of Quenjits taking off now," Jarvis said, marking the location on my HUD. "But you'll need to move quickly, sir." I pointed towards the forest, at a location Jarvis had marked. "This way." "Got it?" Marianne suddenly scooped me into her giant arms. "Whoa, what the?" was my loud response. Then she jumped into the air, my scream filling the air a moment later, while the witch and singer followed through the air. "Tony Stark, Hulkbuster." Tony stepped forward, a loud boom following the impact of a heavy metal foot onto the dirt. When he spoke, his voice was booming thanks to the speakers in the Hulkbuster. "Okay, Blonsky, we're giving you one chance to give up." Blonsky, standing next to the cage that Aberration was locked into, cocked his head, twirling the staff in his hand. A sick grin rose on his face. "What? When you've just made things fun? I've been waiting for a fight like this." "Oh, good. You're one of those," Tony mumbled to himself. "Hulk and/or Banner, you two want a piece?" Hulk smiled slowly. "Yeah, we do." Abomination smiled back. The two monsters apparently needed nothing more than that, sprinting across the grassy field to hit each other with the force of a bomb. Hulk's uppercut hit his opponent in the chin, lifting him into the air, then grabbing him by the ankle to smash his back into the ground. Abomination kicked him back, the grass around them blown back by the shockwave of the impact. Abomination rolled to his feet and backhanded Hulk, blood spraying from the giant's mouth. When he raised the staff to stab at Hulk, a massive metal hand wrapped around his forearm, pulling him back. Tony punched Abomination in the face, a sound like metal on stone filling the air. "Oh," Abomination growled out. Tony didn't let up. He stepped in with another punch, his elbow erupting with the plume of a rocket to deliver an impact with the force of a small explosive. Abomination, in a quick move, stabbed his staff into Tony's arm, twisting it off. Tony ignored to damage to punch his opponent with his other hand, then blasting him away with a powerful repulsor blast, the staff ripping through his arm. Abomination snarled in pain at the powerful blast pushing him back, trying out walk through it, when Hulk appeared to dropkick him in the ribs, sending him into the forest. Hulk rolled into a landing, then ran to follow Abomination, the pair disappearing into the forest as trees began to fall. Tony looked down at his arm, watching atoms flow to fill the damage made by Abomination's new toy. For a brief moment he considered calling for a replacement arm. Yuta dismissed the idea. Better to save that for later. Shriek! His thoughts were interrupted by the squeal of metal getting bent. Tony turned to see Aberration tearing her way out of the metal cage, using that magical staff to stab her way out. "I really hate Asgardian toys, especially since I only seem to find new and dangerous ones." Tony grumbled as Aberration stared at him through the broken metal with glowing yellow eyes, reminding Tony of Jack Nicholson in The Shining. "Rawr!" Rana jumped out of the cage and landed on Tony, punching the Hulkbuster's big gold mask, her scaled fists denting the metal. "I'm going to tear you out of that thing?" "Usually something I love to hear from a woman," Tony yelled back, placing a palm against her stomach and blasting her into the air. "But I'm currently with someone," he quipped, as Rana flipped in the air before landing on clawed feet, her scaled abdomen covered in black soot. Tony blasted at her again, but the gamma-enhanced ducked, running low to the ground. She slid around another blast and tackled Tony, spinning around to toss him in the direction Abomination and Hulk had gone. "Damn it, lady, this is a new suit!" Tony shouted, twisting in the air, firing his repulsors to float over the forest. Aberration leaped towards him, only to get a repulsor to the face that sent her spinning in a series of backward flips. He caught her by the right leg and spun to throw her into the forest. She hit a giant tree, the wood cracking on impact. Then Tony sped forward and punched her through the tree. She roared before jumping at him, twirling the staff to stab it deep into the Hulkbuster's chest, scratching the Iron Man suit within. "Thor, we need to have words about where your people leave their toys, buddy," Tony growled in the back of his throat as his HUD screamed at him. Rana ignored the quip to elbow the Hulkbuster suit, screeching like a banshee, then tore a big chunk out of the chest, kicking him back. Tony twisted in the air and unleashed a unibeam from his arc reactor that did a wonderful job of chewing up the scenery, sending both Rana and a big chunk of forest flying deeper into the woods. "Veronica," Tony said quickly, "gonna need a new heart. This chick broke mine. A new hand, too." Luckily, Veronica was designed to understand jokes as orders. The floating machine flew over the forest and ejected a chest plate and arm. The two pieces pressed against Tony, atoms flowing to fill the spaces in Tony's armor until he was back at full capacity. Good thing, too, because Rana had met up with Hulk and Abomination. She was on Hulk's back, tearing at his armor while Hulk was being punched in the face by Abomination. Tony rose into the air and flew after them. Yo! Tony landed on the ground and kicked Abomination. The former soldier responded by grabbing his leg and leaping away. Whoa! What the f— Abomination landed on a hill, the granite shattering under them. "Might as well take care of you first," Abomination smirked, putting a foot to the Hulkbuster's chest and pushing it down to the ground. "You made this to fight Hulk? Well, that's the thing. I'm a soldier, Stark, not some giant moronic child. You can't beat me." Bunsky leaned down and laughed. "I'm smart, Stark. You can't beat me with something made to beat an idiot." "Yeah, about that," Tony raised his hand. A burst of gas hit Abomination in the face. The green monster coughed, stepping back. Tony rose up and kicked him away. "You're a soldier, sure." Tony punched him with a rocket-enhanced punch, then blasted him back with repulsors. "But Banner is a freaking genius, one of the best engineers in the world. Guess who helped make this armor?" Abomination coughed. "Bob, what did you do?" "Concentrated gas that Bruce made. It was our attempt to make something that can knock out Hulk. Guess it needs work." Tony raised a fist and slammed down into the head of the kneeling Abomination, sending him to the floor, then kicked him into a boulder. "Gotta say, can't really see you as Hulk's rival." Abomination rose up in a swift movement, catching Tony's next punch. He twisted and stabbed, the staff in his hands slicing through metal until it was inches from Tony's shoulder. Tony grimaced at the alerts his HUD was throwing up. That was way too close for comfort. Then Abomination pressed further, flesh splitting with the motion. "Echo!" Tony screamed in pain, warm blood pouring down his chest. "Huh? No more funny jokes?" Abomination crowed, twisting the staff. "Come on, Stark. Tell me something funny." Tony struggled, clenching armored fists. "Sure. Let me just do the setup for the joke." Tony ignited his boot thrusters, flying upwards. When Abomination, surprised, tried to let go of Tony, the billionaire wrapped his arms around the Gamma monster. "Jarvis put everything in the boosters." "Yes, sir." The boots released white bursts of energy, sending the pair thousands of feet up. "Get Wadu off," Blonsky screamed, clawing at Tony, sending chunks of metal to the ground below. Tony grimaced at the pain and watched the altitude on his HUD, ignoring the warnings flashing as atoms kept flowing to fill the gaps in the armor, only to get torn out again. The staff was still impaled in Tony's shoulder, atoms moving into the wound to prevent blood from spilling. As soon as they were at the height of the surrounding mountains, Tony let go. Abomination, not thinking, leaped away. He fell with Tony floating in the air above him, screaming in his booming voice as he twirled in mid-air. Tony fired off all rockets had in the suit, hitting him over and over. He then flipped in the air, diverted all power to repulsors and thrusters, and slammed into the falling Abomination, drilling into the monster's chest with palm repulsors, while sending them both into a meteoric descent towards the ground. "Here's the punchline," Tony roared as he slammed Blonsky into the ground with an earth-shaking explosion, destroying the hill they'd been fighting on. The impact tore apart the Hulkbuster suit, the granite hill, and much of the surrounding forest. From the way Tony felt, he had to guess he'd also bruised every inch of his body as well. For a moment, things were still, then Tony rose out of the crater, coughing. He grinned at the sight of the groaning abomination. Not Richard Pryor funny, but I gave it a good shot. The Hulkbuster's left leg fell to the floor. Whoa! Tony wheeled his arms around as more pieces fell away, leaving him standing on one leg with even the Dark Force armor within the Hulkbuster barely holding together. Need to work on that. Then, before Tony's disbelieving eyes, Abomination began to rise. He did it slowly, carefully, but he was getting up. Oh, come on. You're gonna kill you. Abomination coughed up green liquid. Kill you. His grip tightened on the staff, its runes burning with orange fire. Rah! Tony prepared to call for a new leg, but Blonsky was already rushing in, staff raised to stab his heart. Then, in between Tony and Blonsky, a rainbow of colors came down from the sky, a light with power. From that beam, a familiar flash of shiny metal flew out to hit Abomination in the face, exploding into a bolt of white lightning. Abomination fell back. He had time to blink once. Ugh, Blonsky said weakly. Then he fell face down, eyes closing. The hell took you so long? Tony asked weakly, grinning beneath his helmet as the rainbow beam stopped to reveal its occupant. Neither one noticing the dark red stream of vapor that flowed away from the symbol the rainbow had left behind on the ground. Bruce Banner, Hulk. Hulk grabbed a tree and ripped it from the earths, spinning to swing it at the irritating woman attacking him. She backflipped over the tree, landed and leaped in with a hook punch to his chin, sending him back. Girl Blonsky! Hulk roared. It's Rena, you moron! Rana yelled back. Hulk ignored that. Instead, swinging the tree again, she parried it with her staff, then kicked him in the knee, forcing him to kneel. She tried to punch him in the ribs, but Hulk caught her fist, lifted her high, and looked her in the eyes. Not moron, Hulk snarled, just learning. He threw her up, then swung the tree into her like he was at bat, sending her into another tree. She screamed in pain, then gasped when a green foot hit her in the stomach. She raised her staff and stabbed it into the leg currently pressing its foot into her. Hulk yelled, dropped his tree and limped away, and Rana fell to her knees, coughing until she vomited. Ay, asshole. Fighting, Hulk reminded her as his leg healed. The two eyed each other, green eyes on yellow. That's when the beam of rainbow power fell in the distance. They looked over at it in surprise, then looked back at each other. Rana looked down at the staff in her hands, struggling through the horrific memories the staff was pulling up. Memories of a man over her, panting and ignoring her pleas. Yarg! The memories pushed through. She leaped towards Hulk, surprising him, stabbing his abdomen. She did it over and over, ignoring the green fists that beat on her, tears pouring, eyes glowing, staff slippery with green blood, and the memory forcing her to a frenzied rage, the taste of vomit in her mouth. Hulk beat on her, hitting her over and over. Their fight wasn't magnificent, tactical, or glorious. It was two monsters, filled with pain, hurting each other, covered in each other's blood, dirt, and wooden shrapnel from the trees falling apart around them, pine needles falling from above. Hulk finally picked up Rana and pushed her to the ground, holding her there as he punched her in the face. Once, twice, 8 times. Rana stabbed him in the arm, holding her down, the two screaming. When they stopped screaming, Rana and Hulk simply looked at each other, both panting heavily. She was still crying, the staff glowing and embedded deep in Hulk's forearm. Hulk's fist was held high, but limp, his face twisting in confusion. Why, sad. Aberration, her face bloody and bruised, grinned through broken teeth. Ha! Who cares? I still won in the end. She passed out, leaving Bruce and Hulk to stare down at her, both heroes at a loss to understand what had just happened. Mahmoud Shahid Dial. I managed to prevent myself from screaming, but being held in Marian's arms as she jumped was not a comfortable experience. I was getting bounced around in her grip, trying not to grunt at each impact on the ground. Sorry, Marian yelled as we went. This is faster. I know, don't worry about oof. I grunted when we hit the ground and jumped again. Don't worry about it. Scarlet Witch and Songbird were flying above us, Songbird on pink wings and Scarlet Witch by blasting red energy below her for propulsion. Wanda seemed a little unsteady, as though she hadn't practiced the maneuver much, but she was still better off than I was. The two followed Marion through above the trees, so I only saw them when Marion broke through the tray line. "Are we close?" Marion asked me. I was going to nod when a green flash jumped through the woods, hitting me and Marion on our way down. "Shit," I shouted, tumbling down into the branches of a tree. I bounced from one to another, curling myself up to keep from bending anything the wrong way. My shields flared with each hit, protecting me somewhat until I eventually hit the ground on my back. When I looked up, Marion was roaring and locked in combat with a green monster, wrestling with the man in the dirt. Songbird dropped from the trees with a Chitauri armored soldier following, blocking his plasma bolts on a pink wall of energy, then blasting him with a pink whale of sound, only to be confronted with more flying Hydra assholes. I rose to my feet and brought my gun up, firing an icer into one of the men, then ducking behind a tree when more soldiers fired at me. Scarlet Witch dropped down next to me, her eyes filled with fear. "This is crazy," she shouted. "This is Tuesday," I said, trying to seem confident while plasma bolts burned away at my cover. When she stared at me, I found myself surprised at the fear in her eyes. I mean, this was the Scarlet Witch. This woman in many universes had enough power to reshape reality, but she was terrified. Before I could think on that, another roar came from in front of us. I looked up to see two gamma monsters rushing us, centipede soldiers in tow. I stepped in front of her and raised my BCW, switching it to repulsor setting and firing quickly. "Wanda." "Oh, right," she spat out. Two red blasts of energy hit one of the gamma-enhanced, sending him flying, and I hit a centipede soldier with a repulsor shot. "Axe, we need backup," I shouted. "Falcon, Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Mockingbird are on their way. We have to run," Wanda yelled in my ear, sounding scared. "We have to—" I didn't hear the rest over the Omnitrix beeping. I hit another centipede soldier as the gamma-enhanced Wanda had thrown away got back up, then reached for the watch and activated it, twirling it quickly. I needed a strodactyl so I could fly out and stop Garrett from escaping, so the second I saw wings I pressed down on the Omnitrix. It took me a second to realize that in my haste while centipede soldiers and two gamma-enhanced rushed us, I hadn't picked Astrodactyl at all. The change was instantaneous. My skin went from brown to inky black, blue accenting me like the patterns on an insect, and with white chunks the color of solid ice in the center. My chest became a segmented blue carapace, the Omnitrix glowing there. My eyes changed to green with some darker spots in the center. My long limbs ended with 3 pointed fingers and a thumb on my hands, and 2 toes and a claw-like heel on my feet. From my back spread 2 large blue moth wings that sprouted upward, 2 smaller ones pointing down, and a pair of antennae at my shoulders. I spread them wide, rising to my full height, white smoke pouring from my mouth. "Big chill." I looked down at myself, registering my new form. "Oh, now you give me big chill," I grumbled to the Omnitrix, my voice sounding ghostly. The soldiers were still rushing us, Wanda staring up at me in surprise. I sucked in a quick breath. Wind inside my chest swirled. I set my feet and flared my new wings. When I breathed out, a cloud of white spread out from me. I pushed hard and pumped out a giant cloud that hit every soldier in front of me. The ground began to freeze over, the plants exploding as the water within them froze. The gamma-enhanced began to slow as ice crawled over their forms, snapping over and over. Wanda managed to be on the ball and started shooting, red blasts hitting the gamma-enhanced, slowing them down further. The centipede soldiers stopped in place, covered in a thick shell of blue-white ice. When the gamma-enhanced didn't stop, I narrowed my eyes and focused. The cloud became a beam. I swept it over one, stopping him about 5 feet away. Then at the other, she stopped mere inches from punching me in the chin. "Chill out," I quipped. Then I turned to Wanda. 1 second, a pump of my wings, and I lifted into the air. With a twirl, I was around the tree. Songbird was floating in front of a group of Chitauri armored men and women flitting about to dodge, blocking their plasma bolts with pink walls, sending them flying with whales and chaining them up. She was getting tired, her left arm already clearly wounded. Marion was currently beating on a green woman, another monster down and out behind her as centipede soldiers were being launched about. I headed towards the group of flyers with pale smoke pouring from my mouth, my green eyes narrowing. To their credit, they reacted quickly to my appearance, turning to open fire on me. So in response, I went intangible. It was like nothing I'd ever felt, being there and not there. Separate from the universe, feeling as though nothing was real anymore. Plasma bolts were fired at me. They went right through me like the mirage I almost was. I flew forward, a ghost in all the ways that mattered, aiming at one man in particular. He had time for his eyes to widen. Then I flew through him. He became covered in ice, his armor shattering as he fell from the sky. I swept through the crowd, Songbird joining me. Scarlet Witch came around to join in, red and pink smashing soldiers out of the sky. Once they were done, I landed on the ground, my wings wrapping around me like a cloaked hood, my eyes on Marion and her opponent. I raised my hands and white streams from my palms hit the gamma-enhanced in the back. Songbird and Scarlet Witch joined in, the three of us staggering the girl. Marion uppercut the 10-foot-tall monster back. "Eaujuk," the woman screeched, ice covering her chest as sand and whatever wonder was blasting. Was it chaos magic in this reality, sending her to her knees, Marion giving her a right cross and sending her to the floor. Marion fell to her knees, panting, Songbird landing next to her to rub her friend's back. "You okay?" I asked, stepping forward. When Marion and Melissa gave me confused looks, I realized they had no idea who I was. "It's me, Dial. I got a new form." "Oh," Marion said slowly, looking confused. "Does that happen often?" "More these days than before," I admitted, putting the question of why in the background. "Can you fight?" Melissa and Marion shared a brief look before they rose to their feet. Marion smiled. "Yeah, for Helen always." Must have been a hell of a story behind the loyalty they held for each other. I unfurled my moth-like wings and lifted into the air. I was going to say something, but the three women were already moving in the direction we'd been heading earlier. I joined them, shooting through the air with a fluttering of my wings. Big Chill felt so different, hot and cold all at once, as though I was on the cusp of existing and disappearing from the universe. But it felt comfortable. I don't know how feeling as though I was fading from the universe could feel good, but it did. I did hope I didn't start going on a metal-eating spree all in the efforts of having alien bug babies. That would be super weird. Might need to look into diaper prices. Moving over the forest, Songbird and Scarlet Witch flew beside me. In the distance, I could see several Quinjets taking off, surrounded by more Chitauri armored flyers. "How accurate are you?" I asked Songbird and Scarlet Witch, Marion bounding up to join us before I could down into the woods again. "I don't know," Wanda admitted. "I've never tried to hit something so far away." "I can hit them," Melissa said, her pink wings flapping. With a quick song, she released a blast of pink sonic power, hitting a Chitauri soldier. He sprawled, but stabilized himself in the air. A couple Quinjets twirled to confront us, some flyers twisting around as well. The others, however, began to speed up. I pushed myself forward, going intangible and ignoring the bullets and plasma bolts flying through me. Instead, I aimed for the lead Quinjet, passing the others and flying into it, landing inside. The Quinjet was mostly empty, but a couple of things stood out. First, the two men standing before me. One was tall, with dark black skin and armor on his chest and arms. He raised a hand, lightning fast when I entered, aiming it at me as a mini rocket launcher popped out of his arm. That would be Deathlock, then. The other guy was a surprise. I mean, I knew what he'd look like from his files, but seeing Bill Paxton standing in front of me with a snide smile was weird. On either side and behind of the men were three white tanks, holding a person inside each. One on the right was Helen, looking like Trish Stratus. The other was the guy from Godzilla. Wait, didn't Elizabeth Olsen play the guy's wife? And they were brother and sister here. I smashed away the illogical thought and focused the last one. A tall, green-skinned woman rested inside, sleeping peacefully. I stared at her for a moment before focusing on the two men. "John Garrett?" I asked. "Yeah," the man said, smiling. "And you're that alien kid, huh? You've caused a lot of trouble." Like every SI before me, I admitted freely, stepping forward. Deathlock fired a rocket, but I went intangible, the rocket bouncing off the wall behind me, encased in ice. Turning tangible again, I kneeled and pressed my palms against the floor. Ice flowed across the floor, sinking into the Quinjet. I released a cloud from my mouth, and the two men shouted as ice began to fill the jet. The whole aircraft shook, compromised by the ice filling the inside of the Quinjet's machinery. Soon it began to fall out of the sky, metal cracking under the stress. Suddenly an arm came out of the smoke, reaching for my throat. I went intangible, the arm moving through me so fast I couldn't freeze it. John Garrett appeared, grinning madly, and slapped a button to open the back door. Before I could wonder what he was doing, Deathlock tackled me just as I went tangible, both of us falling out of the Quinjet. Tumbling through the air, I went intangible again, Deathlock letting go of me before he could freeze over. Jets of purple snapped to life on his feet, propelling him away from an ice beam I sent at him. He fired a rocket I let go through me. A strange port opened on his shoulder. My experience with being in War Machine and Iron Man's armor warned me to go intangible before plasma bolts started flying. Apparently, he had gotten some serious damn upgrades. I looked at the Quinjet, which was slowly dropping through the sky, then at Deathlock, thinking, "Come on, guys," I thought to myself, "save them. 10 minutes earlier." Sky. Over the New Mexican desert, Sky typed at a computer, activating the programs she'd created and throwing in some stuff Tony and Dial had supplied her with. It with the hacking expertise of 3 genius hackers, one of them alien, she soon had the access she needed. Smirking, Sky looked up at the people surrounding her. Maria, Melinda, and Coulson stood before her, with several bridge elites and US Marines, all in front of a door to a base with the Cybertech logo on it. "Let go, say hi," Sky tapped a button on her laptop, the door in front of her clicking open. "That's," Maria said, smiling as the bridge elites rushed in. "Sky, Melinda, you know what to do." "Understood," Melinda said, smiling. She walked in. Sky went to follow, getting a supportive nod from Coulson. As they ran through the halls of Cybertech, taking a right with several US Marines coming along, high above, Sky knew the helicarrier would be dropping cloak and lowering over the base, guns firing on vehicles. Sure enough, explosions began to sound out around them, followed by alarms. Sky switched over to her phone and slipped her laptop into her bag, disconnecting operators on the base from the centipede soldiers with some button taps. She also pulled out a gun, jostling a tiny plastic object aside. Soon they were at a door labeled Incentives. Melinda kicked the door in. 2 centipede soldiers and a Hydra operative looked up at them. "Oh, hi guys," Sky said. The Hydra soldier moved forward, only to get an ISA between the eyes from Sky. The centipedes rushed forward, and the US Marines following Sky and Melinda opened fire, unleashing a barrage of bullets onto the centipedes. They ignored the first 10 bullets. The next ones tore them apart. Sky ran in, opening the door the files indicated. Inside, a young boy with chubby cheeks looked up at her, his skin the same dark color as his father's. "Hey," Sky chirped. "Sky," the boy rushed forward, wrapping Sky up in a hug. She smiled, leaning down to hug him back. When they separated, she reached into her bag and pulled something out. A Hulk toy, handing it to a smiling Ace. She spoke softly. "Okay, Ace, I need you to give me a message." "Mahmoud Shahad, dial." I twirled through the air, going intangible to go through some bullets fired on me from some Quinjets. Deathlock followed, mercilessly chasing me. Songbird was in the air with me, fighting her own battles, but Scarlet Witch had gone to the forest with Marion. I could hear Marion roaring as flashes of red light came from the darkness below. Deathlock was persistent, but my eyes were still on the Quinjet holding the 3 prisoners. Just when Deathlock seemed like he was going in for another shot, he stopped. Then he fired. I watched the rocket he'd fired tear a Chitauri armored soldier in half. Far off, I could see a winged figure flying toward us. Some explosions came from the forest below, the twang of a bow preceding each one. At the same time, Deathlock started tearing into his allies, plasma bolts from his shoulder and rockets from his arm firing over and over. So Maria and Coulson had saved the prisoners at Cybertech, which left Garrett. I flew towards his struggling Quinjet, free to do so now, and went back inside. He looked over at me. "Don't suppose you'll surrender," I offered, my wings wrapping back around me. He smiled. "Why?" "The future needs me to translate the words, to show a way to the end of it all." "I can see it, you know. I can even see your soul, torn through the universe, lost on the winds of faith. But there's a better—" I froze him over. He even looked surprised before he was encased in an ice prison of blue-white. The pilots looked over at me as I walked towards them. "Can we still surrender?" the pilot asked. When I nodded, he sighed in relief. "I'll just land the Quinjet then." As the jet lowered, I looked over the prisoners, focusing on the one in the center. "Whoever is with the Hulk, tell him I have her." A Quinjet suddenly flew past, turning around to aim at us. He flew towards us, apparently about to kamikaze us. "What's he doing?" the pilot shouted. "We're going to crash!" the co-pilot yelled as well, trying to twist away. I flew forward, going intangible to move through the glass, erupting into the air. Then a bolt of lightning fell from the sky, hitting the other Quinjet hard enough to bash it into the forest below. More bolts struck the battlefield, hitting the Quinjets one by one. A final Quinjet flew past me, trying to escape. A silver flash came from the sky, piercing through. As the final Quinjet spun through the air, I looked up at the sky. He's back. Thor, the Asgardian deity of thunder, standing on the Defiant for support, grinned down at all of us, blonde hair flowing in the wind. Baron Wolfgang von Strucker. Strucker stood in his personal Quinjet, sighing sadly. "We lost so much, simply to survive." Aberration. The centipedes. Garrett. The grapplers. All gone. He shook his head, still looking out of the window as they flew over the ocean, a fleet of Quinjets following as they escaped their chasers. Soon a large section of those flying with them twisted in the air, headed elsewhere. Strucker watched them with a scowl. Malik, off to his ridiculous religious crusade, to bring a god to life, with all the improvements Stearns had given him. Strucker shook his head and turned back to his goal, out across the ocean. The scepter was held in his gloved hand, glowing. They flew for hours, simply trying to get away. As the sun began to drop into the horizon, the radio crackled to life. "Sir," a Hydra operative on the other end said. "Stearns." "Hi." "He what?" Strucker asked, unperturbed. I don't know, sir. He just disappeared. He was in the back of our jet. Then he pressed something, and now he's gone." The radio crackled again. "Baron von Strucker," List shouted. "We're getting the reports. Dozens of boxes of our resources have vanished." Strucker turned and walked into the back of the Quinjet, unworried. As he did so, the screen there came to life. On it, Samuel Stearns stood in a dark location, smiling smugly as he watched Strucker approach. "You've betrayed me, Stearns." It wasn't a question. When Stearns spoke, his voice was as clear over the stereos of the Quinjet as though he was right there. "Please, Wolfgang, I'm honestly not surprised you didn't manage to predict me, but you must have had some inkling, and please call me the leader." Strucker frowned. "A bit presumptuous as names go. A man chooses the name he embodies," Stearns smirked. "I decided it was time to go our separate ways. I've taken some essentials, things that would be more useful in my hands as payment for my services. I'm afraid that your primitive mind simply won't be able to use them to their full potential," Stearns chuckled. "I'll have to take Miss Walter's blood diamond and the agents as well to use in my own experiments. It was a mistake, you know, to allow me so much leeway with the phase harmonic teleporter and the portal Malik believes leads to his god. Really, Wolfgang, understand this isn't personal. I know you aren't as enlightened as I am, but you must see that. You need more experience, Stearns," Strucker said. He smiled. Stearns frowned. "I'm sorry. You think I never anticipated this?" that I never saw the glares, the covetous looks. I knew you would betray me, Stearns. It was just a matter of time, so I forced the issue. He raised a hand, holding a detonator switch. As though I would ever let you take my subjects. Miss Walters has been returned to Mr. Banner to keep him from feeling any need to chase us, with footage of your experiments on her. As for Blood Diamond, a girl with black hair and eyes of topaz stepped into view. She and the agents are with me, so Stearns, if you've truly teleported something from the planes you believe to hold my current passengers. Stearns's eyes widened. Strucker flipped the detonator switch. A series of loud explosions came from the other end. Stearns shouting before flame hit him, the screen going to static. Strucker smiled, tossing aside the detonator and looking over at the two cryo tubes sitting in the back of his Quinjet, Agents Triplet and Carter sleeping peacefully within. Pilot, make way to Germany. I have something to pick up. A family heirloom. Yes, sir, the pilot said. With that, the Quinjet twisted in the air, the others following. As the battle settled, something flew over the ground, a red mist floating gently as it passed through the world. It flew towards a bridge elite with his back turned. The man was walking through the forest with his team, gun, aimed high. The red mist touched his back, then sank into him, or, more specifically, his armor. The man blinked in surprise when his HUD flashed. He slapped his head, watching the HUD flicker before solidifying. Hey, one of the other soldiers, a woman asked. You okay? Yeah, the man said, shrugging. You sure this stuff doesn't glitch? Who knows, she said with a chuckle. He chuckled as well, moving on. And the presence waited within. Mahmoud Shahed Dia. Later that night, there was a lot to do. Soldiers were brought in to clean up after us, arresting Widra operatives. I found myself curing a lot of Gamma soldiers, leaving them normal humans, all of them ungrateful assholes screaming about how I took their powers. Scarlet Witch and the Grapplers were brought in for questioning since they were technically former enemies. But they were brought in gently, while Helen, Pietro and Jennifer were put in medical. Deathlock, on the other hand, was arrested, put in cuffs made by Tony himself. He didn't seem to care. Hulk and Tony brought in Aberration and Abomination in after apparently tearing most of a battlefield apart to do it. When I informed Hulk that I'd managed to find Jenny, he gave me an oddly gentle hug, smiling as he changed back into Bruce. Some people on our side had died. Gamma monsters, Chitauri armored soldiers, and centipedes did some of it. But good old bullets did the same. I found myself staring at the body bags at one point, stacked side by side. I'd seen stuff like that in movies, but it took a while to sort everything out, and even that was just set up for the next day. In the end, though Strucker escaped, he'd cut off a few limbs to do it. A majority of his soldiers were dead or arrested. Jarvis and Axe had gotten a lot of information about his other bases off computers, and armies across the world were assaulting them even now. Garrett's frozen ass had been put in a van and carted away, Deathlock glaring at him all the while. Of course, it was hard to be melancholic, because Tony immediately called for a party. I'd need to speak to a certain Asgardian as well. The Omnitrix was already glowing yellow.